Reborn in the empire where the sun never sets to become a pirate. Hey, fanfic family. So glad to see you here again to continue this incredible adventure. As always, kindly remember, this story is 100% fiction, so don't go looking for dimensional portals in your closet. All rights to this fantastic novel belong to the original author. We're just your humble narrators of epic tales. Are you enjoying the fanfic? Show it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and dropping us a like. And if you're impatient for more exclusive content, our Patreon is your happy place. Chapter 451, The Strongest Pirate. You know what? From what I've heard, over 60% of the presidents of the Chamber of Commerce in the Union don't go to sea. Eddie Garman and Chuck Parker are the mainstream working models for the presidents of this world's chambers, especially the major chambers. Aboard the Alvet, Katerina made subtle adjustments to the fleet's formation while taking a moment to speak to Leif. Leif couldn't understand why Katerina was telling him this. He rubbed his bald head, straining his brain cells with embarrassment. Is it because there are so few legitimate privateering chambers? Of course there aren't many privateering chambers on the scale of the Drake Chamber of Commerce. After all, letters of marque are both a right and a restriction. Most privateers are engaged in piracy. Only a very few, like the captain, are unencumbered by letters of marque and are skilled in business. Leif's head was even more swirling. He rolled his eyes and said, "Dibbo, I like to speak my mind." Sorry, Catalina was stunned for a moment and couldn't help sighing. The captain is the most talented businessman I have ever met. It only took him 6 years to become the leading tycoon in the New World. In a few years, he might become one of the richest people in the world. The problem is that he is too warlike. The direct fleet, Valkyrie, Pierce's Lady, and the Valkyrie Class No. 2 and Valkyrie Class No. 2 ships being built by the Hyde shipyard. I often wonder, does a Chamber of Commerce really need so many over-the-limit warships? We are not going to war with any country. We have already fought. Leif suddenly interrupted. With countries, huh? Didn't the captain tell you that in Africa, we fought against the Omanis and the Portuguese? The two unnecessary over-the-limit ships you mentioned brought us victory, not only recovering tens of thousands of pounds in losses, but also earning a port of tens of thousands of acres and hundreds of thousands of pounds in profits. The captain said I thought too little. Leif cut open a freshly caught tuna with his teeth, slicing a paper-thin slice and putting it in his mouth. He told me not to think of war as a collection of battles. It is the most profitable business in the world. The winners make a fortune, while the losers lose everything. Drake covered a distance that others would take 100 years to cover in just 10 years. That was all thanks to the war. Without the war, the Golden Hind might still be hanging around Bridgetown and Kingston, haggling over the 12% profit margin and the 14-day round-trip journey between coffee and sugar. Without the war, he might not even have saved enough money to buy a level 5 galleon. I always remember my first encounter with him. Bonnet and I wanted to rob the wine on his ship, but we ended up fighting at the dock in Stavanger and almost collapsed a plank road. At that time, the cargo on his ship was only 100 or 200 pounds. After cutting expenses to the limit, even in the best conditions, he could not make more than 300 pounds a month. It was the war that made us the richest group of people in the world. Or rather, it was the captain's way of running the war that allowed us to make money faster than robbery. Leif finished a whole piece of sashimi, wiped his dagger, clapped his hands, and stood up. Dibbo, I don't like to use my brain. But I know Eddie Garman and Chuck Parker are both paid by Drake. And you're using your connections in New Orleans to secretly provide low-interest loans to the Spanish, using the dividends from the endless war. The world order advocated by the Knights won't give you that. Besides, merchants and bandits are inherently the most unruly people in the world, and we are privateers, bandits and merchants, we are both. Katerina was stunned. What you just said, was that what the captain told you to say to me? Most of it was his way of teaching me a lesson, and a little bit I came up with myself. Leif pursed his lips. Ever since the flagship was replaced with a Valkyrie, I found that I need more things to do to pass the time, because it's boring. The dark clouds of war are gathering off the western coast of Bastère. The battle is approaching. The participating forces were Blackbeard's main force, renowned as the most formidable in the world of pirates. Even with a loss of 5 ships due to injury, the total number still stood at 16. These included the specially modified Beige-class gunboat Queen Anne's Revenge, 4 different types of Tyre V galleon destroyers, 3 Beige-class clippers, 6 Brigantine-class gunboats, and 2, most uniquely, heavily armed sea batteries converted from multi-masted slave trading schooners. During the Golden Age, The greatest fear among Caribbean pirates was the constant presence of a few great pirates capable of capturing commercial and even naval ports. Francis Drake, Henry Morgan, Ptolemy Roberts, and countless other notorious leaders throughout history each achieved such near-mythical feats. The ability to capture a prosperous commercial port protected by its fortified batteries meant the difference between a roving bandit and a powerful force. Only 3 pirates in the world today possess this honor: Blackbeard, Ptolemy, and Lorraine. Of the 3, Lorraine conquered the most ports and had the greatest record, but he was universally known as a fake pirate, his exploits often tied to the Royal Navy's operations, even the less publicized Battle of Muscat. Before the Pirate Wars, Ptolemy assisted the Spanish Navy in capturing a Portuguese port in South America. The actual outcome of that battle remains unknown, but it is known only that Ptolemy's power soared from one of the greatest pirate lords of the time to the sole leader. Blackbeard's exploits are the most well-known. During the Second Society War, he plundered the heavily fortified city of Port-au-Prince, achieving fame in one battle thanks to his 4 massive, multi-masted schooners, converted into naval artillery batteries. The 4 massive ships were based on multi-masted, ocean-going slave ships, ranging in size from 40 to 60 meters. Blackbeard outfitted them with thick armor and enclosed upper decks, and reinforced their broadsides with various types of guns scavenged from the black market, transforming them into slow-moving, yet powerful, floating islands. The 4-masted French ship, the Romantique, was 40 meters long and had 62 guns. The 5-masted British ship, the Golden Shackles, was 50 meters long and had 68 guns. The 5-masted Portuguese ship, the East African Radiance, was 50 meters long and had 66 guns, and the 5-masted Portuguese ship, the Black Beauty, was 40 meters long and had 60 guns. Of these, the Black Beauty was sunk by Lorraine's scheme in an encounter in early 1784. While the East African Radiance had recently been damaged by Bell's direct hit in the Virgin Islands and temporarily withdrew from the fleet, only the Romantique and the Golden Shackles remained, following closely behind the Queen Anne's Revenge. Even so, they remained Blackbeard's source of confidence in sinking the Lorraine and reclaiming Drake. Blackbeard anticipated this decisive battle, and so did Lorraine. Following his order to battle, the direct fleet quickly split into 2. The main force, centered around the Alvet, with destroyers in the center and frigates on the outside, slowed to 4 knots, leaving only the brigantines, like jellyfish tentacles, to wander outside the circle, their sails inflated, expanding the perimeter in circles. The Valkyries surged forward, powered by their wing sails at a speed of 10 knots, swooping down upon Blackbeard's imposing yet chaotic fleet. Atop the mainmast, Blackbeard watched Lorraine's shift in formation with squinting eyes. Let the main formation defend, and the iron-hulled ships attack. British boy, have you guessed my ambush? But even if you guessed it right, you think you can hold up my entire fleet with just this strange ship? It seems I overestimated you. Order, use a double-teaming tactic. The schooner and gallant formations will meet the enemy, while the bog and brigantine formations will bypass the intercepting ships and attack the main formation directly. In this battle, we must ensure that the white banner will never return. Boys, attack. Chapter 452, Engage the enemy. In an instant, the towering peak of the Valkyrie's mast shattered the tranquil sea surface Blackbeard had imagined. The 2 sides entered the deck's field of view, their relative distance 5 kilometers, their relative speed 16 knots, and the final 10 minutes of engagement were counted down. Lower the boats, abandon the davits, Queen Anne, turn 5 degrees starboard, all ships deploy as planned, and do their utmost to disrupt the wind. Lead 3 degrees to port, tack the T-head, Romance and Golden Shackles, take the T-stern, raise their guns, and suppress the white banner's movement. Full sails, raise the bow, and break through. Boys, make the arrogant white banner pay. Valkyrie, advance, in stark contrasting styles, at nearly identical speeds. Lorraine and Blackbeard completed their final adjustments within a minute. The thick slings were cut with sharp axes, and the heavy launch was thrown down the pulleys into the sea. The Valkyrie's speed increased dramatically. During this process, Wang Yu led the stern sail handlers in a rush, pushing the boom, adjusting the massive foresail from tangential to full draft. The stern sail bulged, and the Valkyrie, sacrificing flexibility for a final burst of acceleration, reached a staggering 11.5 knots with only 70% wind support. Like the wind, like lightning. Under the immense thrust, her sword-like bow rose high in the wind and waves, creating a huge angle of 5 to 8 degrees. Like a horse unbridled, her dominance was so dominant that even the waves cried out beneath her. Opposite her, the Blackbeard pirates were no less impressive. This renowned pirate group was completely reduced to pieces on the vast sea. The ships, staggered and kept 100 meters apart, their lines tangled and intertwined, forming a chaotic, radiating pattern centered on the Valkyrie. Lorraine vaguely saw a school of sharks lunging at him, scrambling for the lead, 100 boats jostling for position. The targets of the two groups on the left and right wings were the easiest to discern. They numbered 9 in total, consisting of wind-cutting Beige and Brigantine-class ships, forming 2 scattered formations, one large and one small. They avoided the Valkyrie's path from a distance, like 2 giant pincers, wielding their force towards the circular fleet behind Lorraine. Behind them came the Romance and the Golden Shackles, Blackbeard's main guns. 2 kilometers away, the 2 naval batteries lowered their sails, one anchored horizontally, one on the left and the other on the right, their dense gun barrels protruding from their hatches. Their method of deploying firepower resembled the battle line, a familiar military formation. Their T-tail arrangement was also in line with the favored formations of naval powers like Spain, Portugal, and the Netherlands. However, a true battle line is parallel. While these formed an arc, a true battle line minimizes the distance between ships, never, as they did, with a mere 2 ships separated by a full kilometer. After all, they were never meant to be destroyed or sunk. Lorraine knew that, as hunting devices for the Blackbeard pirates, their primary function was to restrict the prey's movement in the open ocean, much like a fence around a jungle. The center of the fence was the hunting ground, and today's prey was undoubtedly the Valkyrie, while the hunters were the Queen Anne's Revenge and the 4 galleons surrounding her. Enemy ship 1,500 meters away. 5 ships spread out, engage. Lorraine heard the lookout's customary announcement. The voice was loud and steady, without a trace of the panic that would come from outnumbered forces. This inherent confidence made Lorraine smile. He shook his head and muttered to himself, "Your Highness, times have changed. Circle, the Helvet." Unlike the Valkyrie's composure in venturing into danger, the Circle, which gathered almost the entire fleet's main force, exuded a sense of urgency. Enemy contact on the left flank. Distance 6,200, Bag 1, Brigantine 3, Dark Champagne and Campanula are stalling, order Brunhild and Merlin to support. Captain Richard of Brunhild is in overall command, enemy contact on the right flank. Distance 8,100, Bag 2, Brigantine 3, Cornflower has been hit. Wisteria is rushing to rescue, order Gendel, Fregatibird, and Sea Dove to engage. Captain Green of Gendel is in command. Have him bring the damaged Cornflower back to the main formation as soon as possible. Yes. A series of enemy contact warnings blared over the Helvet. The battles were taking place beyond the deck's view, and Katerina couldn't see them, but the rumble of the guns had already reached her ears from the far side of the sea. She deeply disliked this invisible, on-the-spot command. To her, the intelligence from the lookout was like cold, emotionless threads, and she was a shoddy puppet hanging by the threads. The enemy has been encountered, and it has been received. Should we engage them? Yes. What is the formation for the engagement? Command ship? Wingman? Auxiliary ship? Should the command authority be delegated? Yes. Confirm the order? Confirm. She felt like a boss who was just giving up, issuing irresponsible orders, being stingy with her own feelings and emotions, and not even paying attention to the results of the orders. But she had no other choice. Because in this battle, the Helvet was not only the admiral ship of the direct fleet, but also the bait ship for the entire battle. According to the first set of enemy engagement plans arranged by Lorraine, the battlefield was in the waters of Bastaire, and the enemy included the combined fleet of Blackbeard's pirate group and the Skella Bay pirates, with 30 to 50 ships, and the enemy's primary purpose was to take prisoners. Even with the blessing of the Valkyrie Dominator, it would be difficult for the direct fleet to defeat an enemy of this size within a reasonable range of damage. So the plan was divided into 3 steps. The first step was to divide the enemy. The Valkyrie would hold off Blackbeard's main force, the most elite of the enemy fleet. The minimum requirement was to draw the Queen Anne's Revenge and 2 naval batteries away from the main battlefield. By isolating these 3 heavy artillery vessels from the main battlefield, the warships of the direct fleet would be spared from a sudden loss. The second step was to lure the enemy. All warships would converge in a circular formation, but the brigantine would be stationed on the periphery. The circular formation was intended to highlight the uniqueness of the Helvet, signaling to the enemy that Drake was aboard the Alvet. The brigantine would expand the battlefield, unobtrusively weakening the circular defenses and gradually creating opportunities for the enemy to engage. The third step was naturally to close the net. The Alvet and her two closely guarded ships, the Sea Parrot and the Skua, temporarily mobilized the best stormtroopers from the direct fleet, excluding the Valkyrie. The total number reached 700, far exceeding the full crew strength of a galleon and 2 brigs. Lorraine also assigned Leif and his 2 lieutenants to command the assault force, maximizing the Alvet's boarding capabilities. So far, everything seemed to be going as Lorraine had predicted. The Valkyrie proved more attractive than Lorraine had imagined. Not only had it retained the Queen Anne's Revenge and 2 batteries, it had also towed away 4 additional Level V galleons, leaving the Blackbeard pirates with limited firepower to assault the circular formation. The barges and brigantines, with their primary 9-pounder guns and a few 12 and 18-pounder guns, were unlikely to pose a threat to the tough, resilient formation. However, Catalina, as planned, intercepted them outside the main battle area, even deploying Level V galleons and Level VI brigs for support. With a slender, overkill approach, she successfully weakened her own defenses to the enticing state of a vulnerability, but not a major threat. Now, everything was in place. All Catalina needed to wait for was the arrival of the prisoner-taking fleet. She waited patiently. Left wing. Brunhild damaged a brigantine and is joining forces with a Bellflower to flank the Biger. Right wing. Cornflower was hit again, severely damaged. The Frigatebird sank a brigantine. The Sea Dove is locked in a stalemate with a bagger in front of it. Gender is pursuing another bagger. Enemy attack from the rear. 1 Level 5 galleon, 2 baggers, 22 remaining. Galleon class identification confirmed. It's the Vikings' flagship, the Ericsson. Enemy fleet, Leif, dozing off, gasped and sat up. The Vikings Ericsson. Bonnet, no wonder I couldn't find you. You changed ships and hid in Skull Bay. P.S. Regarding battleships' choice of T-head or T-tail positions. Many descriptions of naval battles mention the concept of grabbing the T, meaning seizing the upwind position. The upwind position has many advantages, such as disrupting air currents, causing downwind opponents to stall, better use of the wind, making one's own ships more maneuverable, and so on. At the same time, being upwind also causes the ship to tilt downward. Conditions above moderate waves can easily prevent the powerful lower gun bays from opening, and the impact on the angle of fire further shortens the range. Therefore, in battleship engagements dominated by stationary artillery fire, the T-shaped tail is actually more advantageous. However, there are always exceptions. For example, the British, the only major power with mortars and rapid-fire talons, strongly favored a T-shaped formation, presumably because it gave them absolute initiative in close combat. The French also favored the T-shaped formation. Partly because of the superior design of their ships, their lower bays remained unaffected by the waves unless there were strong winds or waves. On the other hand, anything the French liked, they would grab. As for whether they would be comfortable using it themselves, they were comfortable, anyway. That was it. Chapter 453. Who is in control of the rhythm? Order Storm Petrel to watch her distance. She's going too deep. Gray's direct hit. Brigantine's mainmast is broken. The outcome is decided. Solanum is caught in a flanking area. Tell her to pull back. Direct hit. Report. Solanum has been hit directly by shrapnel, suffering heavy casualties. Catalina's brow jumped. Who's near Solanum? White Pelican and Hydrangea are both nearby. White Pelican is 600 degrees northeast, facing Brigantine 1 and Schooner 2. Hydrangea is 330 degrees southeast, facing Brigantine 2. Hydrangea won't be able to escape her opponent quickly. Catalina pondered for a moment. Have White Pelican disperse the direct hit, rescue Solanum, and bring her back to the main formation? Yes. The messenger sailor quickly ran away. Catalina turned her head and looked at the smoke-filled battlefield. It's true, ants can kill an elephant. The battle in the main formation officially began the moment the Skull Bay combined fleet appeared. Drake's fleet, relying on the superiority of individual ships' combat power, held an advantage in minor details, but due to its lack of numbers, it was at a disadvantage in the overall situation, constantly outnumbered. The primary function of a pirate ship is plunder. Against merchant ships, pirates need agility and high speed, swiftly approaching and seizing vessels while keeping the prey as intact as possible. Because merchant ships are often more valuable than their cargo, Pirates tend to prioritize speed and balance when selecting and modifying their ships, and even great pirates like Blackbeard were no exception. His pursuit of heavy firepower stemmed from two factors: first, the evolving trends in pirate warfare, and second, his scale, which had long since transcended traditional piracy, began to pursue the grand term power. The Skull Bay combined fleet exemplified this pirate status. Aside from the fifth-class galleon that loomed like a dragon in the distance, the remaining 24 ships were led by two 40-meter class barges, 14 brigantines, and 10 high-speed schooners. There were neither brigs, which focused on naval artillery engagements, nor sloops, which overly weakened the combat effectiveness of individual ships. Their ships were primarily armed with 9-pound and 6-pounder cannons, with only the barges carrying a small number of 12-pounder cannons. This gave the direct fleet, primarily composed of brigs and featuring more elite crews, an absolute advantage in one-on-one combat. However, large ships and heavy artillery were never invincible at sea, a fact Lorraine had already fully demonstrated in the Cantabrians. In a one-on-one engagement, the pirates might be far from a match for the direct fleet, but they had a 3 to 4-fold numerical advantage. As long as they employed entanglement and boarding tactics, the Drakes would have no easy victory. They had to be constantly vigilant, wary of pirates' forced boarding attempts, sudden sidekicks, and high-altitude volleyballs. Any negligence could lead to irreparable and devastating losses, as the careless Sooty Gull proved. She was outnumbered, facing 4 ships, including 2 brigantines and 2 schooners. Her support unit, the Storm Petrel, was less than 500 meters southeast, facing 3. For a circular formation naturally prone to defensive tactics, this was a healthy distance. Both ships could focus on one side, and any attempt to cut across the other would put them within optimal firing range of both brigantines. But just over half an hour into the battle, the Storm Petrel went wild. She lost her support position and pursued her adversaries further and further, extending the distance between her and the Sooty Gulls to over 1,000 meters. The Sooty Gulls were completely unaware of this. A brigantine cut across the port side, darting into the Sooty Gull's blind spot and, with a brilliant high drop, simultaneously lobbed 3 buckshot shells onto their decks. The exact number of casualties is impossible to estimate. At least 70 men, including the captain and most of the crew, were gathered on the Sooty Gull's deck when it was struck. A storm of slag and shrapnel swept across the entire aft deck, instantly rendering the Sooty Gull incapable of combat. Fortunately, the White Pelican exceeded Catalina's expectations. Upon receiving the rescue order, the White Pelican immediately and resolutely launched a charge in the opposite direction of the Sooty Gull. This maneuver completely caught its adversary off guard. The schooner facing the White Pelican was unable to retreat and was directly struck by a 12-pound bowgun at a range of 50 meters, shattering its bow in one blow. The schooner was severely damaged, and the White Pelican, in its assault, managed to mend its sails, turn, and accelerate, then charged directly at the brigantine, which had been entangled with it. The two ships crossed in the center of the sea, exchanging a saturation barrage at a distance of 100 meters. The White Pelican's hull was struck in 2 places, and its own buckshot and chain shot pelted its adversary's face. The brigantine stalled due to a broken bowmast. The slightly injured White Pelican forced past its last opponent and arced towards the center line between the Black-headed Gull and her rivals. 5 minutes later, the Black-headed Gull barely escaped the boarding and, protected by the White Pelican and the hydrangea, staggered towards the main formation. A perfect rescue, Catalina admired the White Pelican's fighting spirit. "What's her captain's name, Vifuna Hanji?" the staff officer flipped through the seaman's files. The second daughter of Mr. Hanji, a Pennsylvania farmer, and a 4th-generation pioneer of the New World. Her uncle is the Pennsylvania trade manager of the Caribbean branch. She attended junior high school at her own expense in 1978, transferred to the senior school's command department in 1981, and graduated second in her class in 1984. She was assigned to the White Pelican as second officer. At the beginning of the year, the captain was transferred abroad, and she was promoted to captain. Catalina was stunned for a moment. Captain Hanji, a woman. It was no wonder Catalina felt strange about this. Because of Lorraine, the Drake Merchant Guild doesn't overly discriminate against women. For example, Katerina herself is the guild's only female admiral. But the prevailing social climate remains. Women are few in the industry to begin with, and most of those who do aspire to land-based civilian jobs. Then there's the issue of gender orientation at the guild's academy. The courses offered to women at the junior and intermediate levels focus on social skills and trade, and their careers are essentially confined to land. Yet, Captain Hanji actually graduated from the Advanced Command Department. Katerina took a file from the staff officer and looked through it. At the intermediate level, she ranked 9th in marketing, and 44th in social skills. Valrhona Hanji's major grades were very poor, but she took electives in naval affairs and command, ranking 2nd and 1st in her class, respectively. Her application is included in the file, and the signature at the bottom is Carmen Xavier. In other words, it was Carmen who granted her admission to the Advanced Command Department, thus training what might be the Drake Merchant Guild's first female captain. This is the first time I know that the students of the school are also part of the assets of the General Association, Catalina muttered, throwing away the files. Let this high-quality asset come to see me after the battle. Also, how is the situation of the Grey? It's like a bullfight in the Madrid arena, surrounded by bullfighters and their assistants. The staff officer looked worriedly to the southwest. 1 against 8, Grey can't control his position, has been pulled 3 kilometers away, and will soon be out of our sight. This is also expected. Catalina rubbed her swollen brows, whereas Captain Erickson, in the bottom cabin, his 2 deputies went to the Sea Parrot and the Skua respectively. It seems that he is also prepared. Catalina thought for a while. What are the casualties of the black-headed gull? 26 dead and 41 injured. It's very tragic, but fortunately the command system is basically intact. Only the 3rd mate and the captain died in battle. Have the wounded been transferred? They have been transferred to the bottom cabin of the Alvet. Immediately add 20 people to them. Tell the captain that he has no time to rest. After the personnel are replenished, go to support the Grey immediately. The staff officer was stunned. Admiral, their decks are covered in blood. Even if we don't consider morale, it's so slippery that even running is. That's their problem. Catalina looked at the staff officer dissatisfiedly. Sympathy should be used in the right place, sir. This is a battlefield, and the Alvet is already the most dangerous place on the battlefield. Dangerous? How could the Alvet be? The Erickson has moved. The lookout's warning interrupted the staff officer's question. The Erickson launched an assault on our ship, with a speed of 6 knots, and the relative speed of 3 knots. The Storm Petrel was forced to retreat. The Erickson is gathering its women and is expected to arrive in 15 minutes. The staff officer was horrified. Admiral, the closest to us is the White Pelican. I will ask her to return to the main camp immediately. Let Captain Hanji Guerrilla attack the outer line. All ships on the outer line. Guerrilla attack towards the Grey, and kill as many enemies as possible. Catalina looked at her young staff officer. You go to the Black-Headed Gull to convey this order. During the Alvet operation, the outer command will be delegated to the Grey. Execute immediately. Yes, yes. Chapter 454 Reckless. Bombardment. Portside hit. Repeat, portside hit. Amidst the blaring warning sirens, the Vortex escape, 300 meters to the Valkyrie's left, unleashed a barrage of projectiles. The projectiles arced through the air, swarming around the speeding Valkyrie, splashing water everywhere. The Valkyrie, bow raised high, pierced the water curtain. The port side roared, 3 32-pounder cannons and 2 24-pounder cannons unleashing iron shells at unfavorable angles, and then, as expected, in vain. Lorraine stood at the bow, surveying the chaotic scene. 1 against 7, 2 sea batteries, 4 level 5 galleons, and the Queen Anne's Revenge, which had been remodeled beyond recognition and, like the Valkyrie, no longer fit into a single ship type. The Valkyrie's enemy engaging mechanism is innovative. It not only fully utilizes the large square and wing sails, but also incorporates the lowest rigged fore and aft sails into the overall propulsion system. This sailing technique is unique to Eastern rigged ships. Eastern rigged ships have always favored multi-masted fore and aft sails. The flexibility of fore and aft sails eliminates the need for the mizzenmast to block wind and disrupt the foremast, allowing them to maximize deck space and increase the number of masts. Adding masts requires more deck space, which in turn requires a larger hull, which in turn requires more sails and masts for propulsion. This closed-loop design approach set Eastern ships on a distinct path from Western development from the outset. Western shipbuilders prioritized flow, wind resistance, center of gravity, and stability, all of which were unimportant to Eastern shipbuilders. For them, keel strength and cabin layout were the true core of a ship's design. According to records from the East Indies, during the heyday of the Eastern Empire, Giant ships as large as 100 meters and equipped with 9 masts were constructed in the early 16th century. Western nations often dismissed these historical events as unreliable myths and legends. After all, in the early 16th century, even building a 30-meter galleon was a major undertaking in Europe. Even at the Anglo-Spanish naval battle of Georgian, which propelled the Drake family to prominence, the dominant configurations on both sides were cogs and carracks. It's well known that the Spanish Armada was equivalent to a dozen 40-meter carracks. But Lorraine knew that 100-meter class Eastern warships existed, and Zheng Anyue's treasure ships indeed achieved certain design feats that Western sailing ships never achieved. Of course, Lorraine had no intention of arguing with Western shipbuilders. Whether treasure ships and Noah's Ark were the same thing was irrelevant to Lorraine and the Valkyrie. The Valkyrie was the quintessence of New World shipbuilding, and its most essential feature was its sails, a Bermuda-rigged sail that combined the best of both Eastern and Western design. Like an Eastern schooner, the Valkyrie's aft sail features not only a batten and a boom that can rotate up to 180 degrees left and right, but also a rarely seen boom component on Western ships, a scull. The scull coordinates the steering of the scull, allowing the entire sail to rotate uniformly and remain fixed at any angle. This facilitates turning the scull broadside when needed, temporarily using the scull as a low-rigged square sail. A low-rigged square sail has a unique ability to catch the wind, especially when coupled with a Western-style soft sail. This creates a pocket-like effect, trapping wind and effectively lowering the stern. Lowering the stern is equivalent to raising the bow. This significantly reduces water resistance and increases speed, while also increasing the freeboard on the enemy's surface, allowing the Valkyrie's thick hull armor to be more fully utilized, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. This is the secret of the Valkyrie's enemy engaging mechanism. However, every advantage has its drawbacks. Achieving a joyride in combat actually has relatively stringent conditions. Externally, the wind direction on the battlefield must be stable, neither too weak nor too scattered. The basic standard is a 120-degree wind with moderate or higher winds. Internally, during a charge, the sail rig and course must not fluctuate significantly. Sails cannot be reefed or reefed at will, and the steering wheel cannot be adjusted more than plus or minus 5 degrees. These rigid restrictions make the Valkyrie's bow lift charge truly like the heavily armored knight's charge prevalent in the Middle Ages, resolute, courageous, rigid, and unwavering. Conventional evasive maneuvers are inevitably abandoned during a charge, as the enemy's artillery fire increases its accuracy exponentially. To prevent a direct hit from high-altitude volleyball, the deck crew must be kept to a minimum, resulting in a shortage of manpower in the steering positions. Any excessive turning would almost inevitably lead to a significant stall. This is something that cannot be overstated. Lorraine gloomily assessed her newfound skill. No matter how you look at it, it's nothing but recklessness. Valkyrie charged headfirst into Blackbeard's hunting grounds, advancing swiftly from north to south, her sight set squarely on Blackbeard's flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge. Blackbeard felt deeply insulted by her unassuming, direct approach. He and Lorraine were old rivals. Unlike Cotton Jack, who had rarely gained an advantage against Lorraine, Blackbeard had always firmly held the initiative in their previous encounters, regardless of victory or defeat. Lorraine had to rack his brains and exhaust his energy to achieve a narrow victory over him. This was not only the consensus of the entire Caribbean, but also Blackbeard's own understanding. But, just because of a new ship, Lorraine suddenly stopped cheating. A wizard doesn't cast spells, a swordsman doesn't draw his sword. There could only be one reason for this: the opponent wasn't worthy. He, the most powerful pirate lord in the Caribbean, His Highness Blackbeard, whose reputation for ferocity could easily silence a child's night cry, was no longer worthy of consideration? Just because of that ridiculous, tortoise-shell-clad ship? It was sheer utter travesty. Blackbeard imagined a wild boar in a tortoise shell charging through his carefully constructed enclosure, while his hunters. What are they doing? Blackbeard gritted his teeth. What are they afraid of? Afraid of being mauled by that toothless, clawless iron turtle? Do they still remember being the most brutal pirate in the Caribbean? Zheng Anyue, let them advance. Boldly cut a broadside, boldly flank the rear, cut off her windward, trip her legs, lob buckshot onto the white flag's deck, and rip this madman into pieces. In an age without telecommunications, how far could a man's rage carry? Lorraine never considered the question. Nor did he attempt to connect the pirate's actions with Blackbeard's own fury. Less than a kilometer into the advance, he could clearly sense the pirates on the opposite side becoming restless. The bombardment was getting closer, the turnarounds were getting later and later. The pirates seemed intent on disrupting Valkyrie's windward position. While this was a brilliant tactic for interrupting the advance, with the current numbers of the Blackbeard pirates, they would need at least 2 ships to circle the Valkyrie's rear and keep within 100 meters of it. However, the Valkyrie was faster than any of Blackbeard's ships, and overtaking from behind was clearly impossible. They attempted a whirlpool escape, but were now over 300 meters behind. All they could do was cut sideways, tackling the Valkyrie's windward side, and then resign themselves to their fate. Lorraine suddenly had a strange epiphany. It seems our dear Yazha has been underestimated. He whistled, turned to Edley, and said, "Go tell Captain Desais that the pirates will soon be within 100 meters of our starboard side, presumably to disrupt our windward approach." I know this sounds unbelievable, but have him be prepared for a static close-in bombardment. A moment later, Edley faithfully relayed Lorraine's exact words to Acheron, including the exclamation, "Our dear Yazha has been underestimated." Acheron was stunned for a long moment, blinking in a daze. "Edley, you said that the captain judged that those reckless pirates were planning to approach and cut through from our starboard side? Parallel? Across." "These are the captain's exact words, Mr. Chief of Gunnery." "Did they think they were dead? Or did they not see so many open gun ports on Valkyrie and thought we gunners were dead?" "It's very likely that they thought you were dead," Edley answered seriously. "Otherwise, no one would joke about their own life." "Ah. This is really exciting news." Yatron swung his arms and went into the gun cabin from the bow cabin. "Please tell those pirates that Yatron Desais sends his regards to their sisters." Chapter 455, The Man Has Love, the Concubine Has Intention. "Gentlemen, love." The familiar opening line echoed through the Valkyrie's gun bay, as solemn as a mass, echoing only with a singular priest's voice. In the civilized world, gentlemen pursue love. Do you know why? Why aren't men the only ones pursuing love? Only a small minority of men, gentlemen, pursue love. The intern, who had recently lost their virginity, raised his hand. "Because of excellence, sir. Gentlemen are superior men, only they can conquer women." "Then how did you manage to escape that?" Acheron glanced down at him condescendingly. "Your cultivation and knowledge aren't enough to qualify you as a gentleman, but your teacher told me that before you set sail, Miss Fiona of St. Croix missed you deeply." The room erupted in laughter. Amidst the laughter, Acheron gazed at the blushing Fiona Conqueror, his soul uttering a deafening cry. When it comes to love, length is the sole criterion for excellence. If gentlemen are considered superior, then every gentleman here would be useless in front of a stallion. He paused. "But we are clearly better at pursuing love than stallions. Because only we understand the true meaning of love. It's a complex union of soul and body. Ladies not only need excellence, they need complete and total satisfaction. Learning to satisfy a lady is a noble lesson every gentleman should learn throughout his life." Yatron pushed aside the gunners and, as if proposing, knelt on one knee before the 32-pounder's plump buttocks. "Physical satisfaction is elementary, spiritual satisfaction is intermediate, and emotions, will, hobbies, vanity, everything related to the soul and faith is the highest level of subjects. A question, gentlemen." He waved his hands to adjust the angle of a gun, and then chose the second gun to continue proposing. "You are invited to a ball, and the dance floor is full of beautiful ladies. What is the first thing you should do?" Deputy Gunner Carey adjusted the gun and pondered. "It should be to clarify the target of your pursuit tonight as quickly as possible." "Tisk." Yatron walked to the third gun with disdain. "Your answer sounds like our love saint captain. You only see that he attracts outstanding women like a magnet, but what is the result? At the age of 25, he is still a virgin. The real answer is to dance. Gentlemen, the ball is a place to choose a mate. Every lady who comes here is looking forward to a good match. This is the most fundamental wish in their hearts. As gentlemen, all we need to do is to carefully polish the masculine charm given to us by God, and then make full preparations to not refuse any beautiful lady's embrace. A true gentleman never chooses beauty, for we respect each of their pursuits of love and know how to grant it to them impartially. Don't forget our original aspirations. We love romance, not women." Second Gunner Carey listened with rapt interest as the fifth gun was adjusted. In his fascination, he also completed the adjustments for the 3 guns. Like polishing a man's charm, each 32-pounder was pointed 80 to 120 meters ahead, awaiting the first pirate lady to throw herself at him. Acheron sauntered over to the 6th gun and gazed lovingly into the porthole. "Oh my! I didn't expect this girl to be so impatient today." The first pirate ship under Blackbeard's command appeared, the Lone Traveler, a standard 1,770 French 44-gun destroyer. According to the Drake Guild, this vessel was originally a Dutch warship that, during a failed raid, ran aground on a reef in a storm, becoming Blackbeard's unfortunate prize. She was the first destroyer-class trophy he had ever captured, marking the beginning of his legendary pirate career. Even with the current might of Blackbeard's pirate group, the Lone Wanderer remained the undisputed leader of the 8 destroyers in the 5 divisions, its strength and prestige undisputed. Undoubtedly, she held a unique symbolic significance within Blackbeard's pirate group. Andrew narrowed his eyes as he gazed at her, his dry lips involuntarily licking. "It seems we're in luck, gentlemen," he said. "Our dance has attracted the most beautiful flower of this ball. Please take your seats, remain reserved, and wait patiently. While you wait, you can ponder my next question. The man has feelings, the woman has intentions, the beauty is shy and undecided. How can we seduce, make her let down her guard?" The men fell into deep thought. One gunner stared at the empty view in front of him, forcing himself not to glance at the Lone Wanderer, cautiously approaching beyond. "We should keep dancing, sir. I heard peacocks will keep shaking their hips until the peahens fall hopelessly in love with them. Keep dancing, that's a good idea." Yatrin sped up the gun alignment. "You know, shy ladies are often gentle, and gentle girls are full of maternal instincts." "What is maternal instinct?" "Maternal instincts is an incurable desire for control. Don't be fooled by those gentle, shy girls, gentlemen. You think they were passive, but in fact, they're just picking on your most tender parts. Expose your weaknesses at the right time, your sensitivities, your memories, your clumsiness, whether they're real or fake. Your little lamb needs a reason to throw herself into your arms. Give her that reason. It's the most sacred mission God has bestowed upon us gentlemen." Yatrin quickly completed the alignment of all the gun ports. "Now, all main gunners, take out your pistols. Double the gunpowder, no lead. You have 30 seconds. The gunners hurriedly obeyed, though most had no idea why they were doing so. Orders: odd number gun ports and the upper gun ports fire expelling fire. Gunners on even number gun ports, fire outboard during rounds. Second gunner Carey suddenly realized, "Captain, you're going to, like I said, no one cares whether your clumsiness is real or fake. Our lady just wants a reason." Yatrin laughed. "Come on, gentlemen, give her a reason. Fire the starboard side. Ready. Fire." Boom. The Valkyrie's starboard side fired the first shot. 3 seconds later, the upper deck's 24-pounder blasted the second. 3 seconds later, gunfire filled the second gun bay. 3 seconds after that, the upper deck's second gun bay. Thick white smoke enveloped the side. Amidst a continuous gunfire, dense bullets repeatedly broke through the water, sending sprays billowing across the sky within 100 meters. The pirates aboard the Lone Traveler practically knelt in praise of God. God knows how difficult it is to position a broadside against a rapidly advancing ship without actually entering a broadside. But they did it. From 800 meters to 300 meters, they exploited their line-of-sight errors to control their speed, repeatedly interrupting their straight approach with diagonal movements to create the illusion of a surprise attack. As a result, they even missed the best position for a broadside. Moving from the Valkyrie's port side all the way to her intended starboard side, almost turning a perfectly good broadside into a straight-ahead approach. But everything they did was worthwhile. At the last moment, their mysteriously amateurish maneuvering finally tricked the Valkyrie into saturating fire. The Valkyrie was finished. For the next minute or so, with her guns unloaded and her vision obscured, she was truly a toothless tortoise. She had no means of stopping the Lone Wanderer's approach. The Lone Wanderer would brazenly cut in from her starboard side, severing the wind she depended on. Without the wind's propulsion, the massive vessel could only slow down, struggling clumsily in the impenetrable web until its final destruction. "Maintain course. Accelerate," the pirate captain of the Lone Traveler shouted excitedly. "We're the first to kill the white banner. Hooray!" The Lone Traveler cheered as it surged forward, crossing parallel to the Valkyrie's upturned bow, their overlap increasing. Suddenly, boom! With an unexpected thunderclap, a red-hot iron bullet ripped through the smoke and struck the Lone Traveler's hull. The 32-pounder's force was so immense that the Lone Traveler merely shuddered, its thick hull pierced like paper, a massive hole piercing through it, sending wood chips and debris flying everywhere. There seemed to be a scream. Unfortunately, the Valkyrie, so close, couldn't hear it clearly. The sound of the cannon fire was far more than just one. A second and a third blast clashed in quick succession, as heavy shells burst from the barrels, piercing through the smoke and mist, smashing through the sea surface and the hull. The two ships crossed. Lorraine looked coldly at the shattered remains floating on the sea and whispered, "I hope it won't affect the ship's posture." Boom 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 boom. The Lone Traveler, a self-destruction. Chapter 456 Spear and Shield. It won't affect the ship's posture. In fact, from the moment Edley relayed Atron's reaction, Lorraine knew that maintaining the ship's posture and striking directly at the enemy had become a luxury, bordering on delusion and fantasy. After all, humans have a natural ability to breathe. Regardless of whether their reasons were sufficient, their choices reasonable, or their actions effective, the Blackbeard pirates' attempt to disrupt the Valkyrie's windward position was, in itself, a supreme provocation to the ship's crew. The consequences of this provocation were evident. Hundreds of meters away, the smoke thickened, and the unfortunate lone wanderer might not have been able to distinguish the interspersed gunfire amidst the clashing barrage, but Lorraine aboard the Valkyrie would surely not have missed such a distinct difference. Atron made a trap, and the lone wanderer obediently slipped inside. At 80 meters parallel, it was bombarded by 7 32-pounder guns, 3 of which hit, including 2 direct hits. The first direct hit struck the gun bay, blowing away the second, fourth, and fourth gun ports. Flames shot up into the sky, bodies littered the ground, and ribs and struts were broken. But based on Lorraine's experience, the pirates' ammunition supply wouldn't have been sufficient to cause a massive explosion. The key was the second direct hit, where the projectile breached the lone wanderer's hull mid-rear, then penetrated at least 2 interior compartments. According to the cabin structure of the 1770 French destroyer, the shell's impact point would have been below the gun bay, in the mezzanine above the waterline, with a longitudinal axis running along the center line of the deck. In other words, that was the ideal location for the main ammunition compartment. The lone wanderer began her final journey in the most horrific manner possible. A thunderous roar raged for over a minute, and fragments of human remains spread across a 100-meter radius. The blast wave unleashed its tsunami, carrying the tiny Valkyrie over 200 meters. The poop was shattered into dozens of fragments, the largest of which rose to a height of over 10 meters before spun back down to the wreckage, delivering the final blow to the keel with a resounding roar. Valkyrie withdrew from the charge without a doubt. The sailors, who were thrown to their knees, stood up with their teeth bared. Before they could stand firm, they heard Lorraine shouting, "Deck in place, sail in place. Check the condition of the rudder and keel thoroughly. Each unit should count personnel and report casualties. Gunners in place, starboard in port fire. Idle personnel should go to the dining room to get their guns, and the entire ship should be ready for boarding. Remove the fore and aft sails, remove the wing sails, half sail, starboard rudder 10 degrees to the wind. Gentlemen and ladies, don't forget that the war is far from over. You only have 30 seconds to get the Valkyrie moving again. If you don't want to die in the sea, target the golden shackles, turn, break out. Break out. Break out. Break out, break out. Port rudder 5 degrees, disperse on both sides. Why didn't the damn square sails get adjusted? We are against the wind, understand? Can't you make your own judgments without instructions? I must complain to those paid interviewers in the personnel department. The bow was hit, a shout came from the lookout. We're going to be blown to death. Full starboard, evade. Dodge, hide, evade. Where's my gunner? Go ask him why we haven't opened fire yet. Is his gun just for decoration? Did we forget to bring gunpowder? Does he have guns and ammunition but he's saving them for a salute at his funeral? Does he deserve a salute? I want to hear the cannon fire in 15 seconds. I don't want to hear any excuses before then. I don't care what method he uses, as long as the damn pirate in front of me is sunk to death. If he can't do it, I'll complain to the personnel department. Fire, the gunner shouted. Boom, boom, boom. The Alvet was bustling with activity, and 80% of the noise came from Captain Arthur Frayne, known as the quiet gentleman on board. He started his career aboard the Iris, rising from short-term salesman to long-term cook. During the Golden Deer era, he became second bosun, and then second salesman and second mate during the Jackdaw and Marker eras, finally climbing his way up to the position of Vice Admiral Captain of the Direct Fleet. He was an inspirational role model for the Direct Fleet and a sailor idol. However, he had a terrible temper, especially during battle. He was irritable, short-tempered, long-winded, and incessantly chattering. While this didn't affect his ability to issue timely and accurate combat orders, he also had a knack for making complaints, making him the ultimate justice for the direct fleet. The Alvet's battle time was Captain Frain's time for trash talk. The sailors could only endure his rants, while Katerina habitually ignored them. The main battle entered a fierce stage. All warships, including the Alvet squadron, were organized into 4 battle groups, centered around galleon destroyers. Each group struggled to withstand the overwhelming enemy force. The Valkyrie was an anomaly in the Age of Sail. This statement doesn't simply describe her ship's shape, it rather describes her combat performance. The Age of Sail, especially its final phase in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, was characterized by stalemate and inefficiency. Hulls and cannons, like a sailor's spear and shield, were constantly evolving in the face of adversary forces. Today, the shield has long surpassed the spear. For a 32-pounder of the same tier, penetrating a first-tier ship requires 3 hits within 500 meters, while penetrating a third-tier ship requires 2. A 24-pounder penetrates a 4th-tier ship with 2 hits at 300 meters, an 18-pounder penetrates a 5th-tier ship with 3 hits at 100 meters, and even a 6th-tier brigade requires 2 hits. While this statistically appears to be a normal ratio, the French, the world's best artillery, had a naval hit rate of less than 5%, while the average for the great powers was less than 3%. The average battle line deployment distance was 1,500 meters, with engagements occurring at 800 meters. The average engagement distance for frigates was 500 meters, while the typical range for destroyers was 300 meters. When these data are combined, the outcome between spear and shield becomes immediately clear. Statistics show that, based on the evolution of naval power over the past 50 years among Britain, France, Spain, Portugal, and the Netherlands, nearly 50% of warship losses were due to accidents, while the other 50% were largely due to concentrated fleet fire and unconventional engagements involving close range and boarding. Single-ship victories were rare. Penetrating enemy armor was the biggest challenge facing the Navy of this era, yet it was uncertain how to address it. The direct fleet was undoubtedly in a much better position on the home battlefield than its contemporary counterparts. Their opponents were primarily the weakly defended brigantines and the larger, but similarly defended, barge-type ships. This meant they didn't have to worry about their artillery failing to inflict damage, nor about being destroyed by enemy artillery. They simply needed to be mindful of enemy numbers and be prepared for boarding situations that could effectively kill them. The exception was the Alvet. The Alvet was a 1,780 Bermuda-designed, 40-gun, high-speed destroyer, designed and built by Drake Maritime. Her enemy was Bonnet's Ericsson, a classic 1,770 French-built, 44-gun destroyer. The two ships were roughly at the same offensive and defensive level, with the only minor differences being that the Alvet was faster and more agile, while the Ericsson was thicker, heavier, and possessed significantly greater firepower. Furthermore, the Alvet had 2 companion ships, the 26-gun, Bermuda-class brig-type Sea Parrot and the Skua. Bonnet had gathered 5 of these companion ships to support the attack, 3 classic 20-gun brigands and 2 mixed-rigged schooners, whose firepower was negligible. Catalina clearly understood that the Alvet squadron could not quickly defeat its opponent in a mid- to long-range artillery engagement. Delaying the battle until the other 3 groups had settled the issue would likely result in significant casualties in the subordinate fleet. The best approach now was to follow the established plan and use the Delicate to lure Bonnet to board. But before that, Katerina needed to trim the unnecessary branches. She glanced up at the battle. Alvet, prodded by Captain Frain's scolding, was slowly navigating between the Ericsson, 2 brigantines, and a schooner. The Skua was engaged in a fight with another brigantine 500 meters away. The Sea Parrot and the remaining schooner remained out of the fray, each hiding in the shadows of their respective flagships, waiting for their chance to strike. Captain Frain's command was steady, but to break the deadlock, he needed to work harder and be more aggressive. "Are we taking a risk?" Before Katerina could comprehend the situation, a rumbling thunder suddenly erupted from the south of the battlefield, jolting her out of her thoughts. Looking away at the thick black smoke rising from the horizon, Katerina shouted urgently. "Report Valkyrie's current situation immediately." "Yes, Ms. Debo," the lookout responded with his neck strained. "Valkyrie approached in the first round and destroyed the enemy's level 5 Galen lone traveler." "Destroyed? It has been clearly destroyed." The lone traveler sank very quickly, And the sound of thunder just now was a secondary explosion. It hasn't been long since the battle started, Catalina muttered to herself. Going steady is like a joke. The boss is on the other side of the sea, not Belgidia. She raised her head. Order. The Alvet is advancing to support the Skuit, and the Sea Parrot is supporting from the side. Tell Captain Freyan that he only has 5 minutes to prepare. If he can't do it, I will complain to the personnel department about him. Chapter 457. Your attack failed to penetrate the enemy's armor. You damn lazy bastards. Worms. Maggots. Trouble. Full port rudder. Turn sail. Where's the starboard shelling? Get that destroyer out. Get it out now. The Vice Admiral is going to complain to me, you know? Whoever makes me drop a knife and fork, I'll stick a real one up their asshole. Run. No slacking off on deck. Run, bow gun. Skuna, 100 meters ahead, sink her, boom. The Alvet suddenly became aggressive, shrugging off Captain Freyan's curses and the continuous explosions in the distance, shattering her usual slick image. She interrupted her evasive maneuvering, taking a direct hit from the Ericsson with her hull at a range of 150 meters, sheltering the Sea Parrot behind her. Then, she adjusted her course and launched a relentless charge towards the Skua. She plunged through the gap between the Ericsson and another brigantine, spraying a variety of shells at top speed from both sides. The launch dangling beside her was abandoned. As she raced, she had only half-stretched the rappelling line when a sailor, worried about complaining, chopped it off with an axe. The flying cable nearly took the axe-wielding sailor away. Chaos, disarray. The direct fleet's combat effectiveness was the result of the best hardware and a top-notch command team in the Caribbean civilian sector. The software, the crew, was only as educated as they could be. Even the best-trained rookies are still rookies, especially in a chaotic battlefield like the Battle of Basse-Terre. The mistakes they make are always beyond the imagination of the veterans. Alvet was over 500 meters away from the Skuit, and Catalina only gave Captain Freyan 5 minutes. Within 300 seconds, he had to disperse the enemy ships, adjust course, change the rig, reduce the ballast, and shelter the Skua within his shadow to fulfill Catalina's requirements. Even the Golden Hind back then needed a certain amount of luck to pull this off smoothly, and now with the Alvet. Captain Freyan wanted to streamline the process, getting the Alvet into position ahead of time. While this would draw the enemy closer together, potentially exposing Alvet to a few more direct hits, it would at least give the sailors more time and a greater margin for error. But, what the hell was the sailman tying the rigging of the wing sail into a knot? What the hell was the abandonment of the launch, resulting in a serious injury? The 12-pound gunpowder surplus projectiles in the third port rudder position on the deck were used up. Was it for a salute? Who had moved the boatman's nails into the bilge below? There was no way the wing sail could be deployed in time. Alvet was being attacked by 3 enemy ships. Full sail would only increase the chance of the sail igniting and would do nothing to improve speed in the short distance. The Alvet was currently traveling at 2.5 knots, sprinting to 3.5 in a minute. 5 minutes would be enough to maneuver it, provided there weren't any more drastic changes of direction. The passageway was blocked. The second mate sprinted past Freyan. Ride 10 degrees starboard. Ride for nothing. Freyan kicked the second mate on the back, his eyes reddened as he stared at the schooner, which Bonnet had unknowingly sent into battle. Continue dispersing fire from both sides. Bow gun, schooner 100 meters ahead, sink her. Boom. Boom boom boom. The Valkyrie spun through a hail of bullets. The enemy lead is cutting wide on the port side, rudder 5 degrees starboard. Starboard has been hit, deck crews, take cover. Strike warning. Kren had barely finished his words when the ship began to shake violently. 7 or 8 shells exploded in the sea around the Valkyrie, sending up a mist that obscured vision. Lorraine stood motionless at the bow, arms folded. Just now, he felt a slight tremor beneath his feet. Perhaps 1 or 2 of the Les broadsides had grazed the Valkyrie's hull, but he could clearly see that they hadn't been an effective deterrent. As a large ship, despite its single-gun bay design, the Valkyrie still had a significant advantage in beam height in this civilian-level naval engagement. Her freeboard was 2 to 3 meters higher than that of a destroyer, and her gun dams added another 1.5 meters. This meant that even with a slight angle of turn during broadside, destroyers would struggle to land projectiles on the Valkyrie's deck within 200 meters. They might be able to do so easily at 500 meters, but at that distance, shotgun shells wouldn't reach them, and 12 or 18-pound solid rounds posed a limited threat to the Valkyrie. With chainmail, the deck crews simply had to avoid a scattering of chainmail. This was the advantage of armor. The 2.5-inch, 6.4 cm, armor plating, secured to the hull by thick cast iron rivets and a latticework, was virtually impervious to puncture or shatter by the round iron bullets. The only way to penetrate armor is to transmit enough force to break the rivets into the frame. A 32-pounder loaded with 16-pound solid bullets can achieve this effect with a direct hit within 100 meters. A 24-pounder loaded with 12-pound solid bullets can achieve the same goal with 3 direct hits within 100 meters, or 2 within 50 meters. The British 48 and 68-pounder mortars are certainly more powerful, but their range is limited to less than 200 meters, making them overpowered for armor penetration and performing no better against the Valkyrie in actual combat than the 32-pounder. As for smaller calibers than the 24-pounder, such as the 12 and 18-pounder guns on destroyers, their impact is insufficient to penetrate defenses, and regardless of the impact, the damage to armor plates is close to zero. Therefore, the theory of cumulative quantity into qualitative change in artillery fire does not exist for the Valkyrie. The Valkyrie would ignore attacks below the armor penetration line. The only way a destroyer could threaten her was by boarding, and to do so, the pirates had to be prepared to leave nothing behind, like the few pieces of wood floating on the sea nearby. The Valkyrie parted the mist, and Lorraine regained sight of the battlefield 500 meters to her left. The Vortex escape, previously left far behind after a failed flanking attempt, finally took advantage of the stalemate to catch up 200 meters to her right. The race had just completed a broadside, dodging the Valkyrie's dispersing fire while searching for an opening to turn 400 meters to her starboard. The Tempest Ocean seemed ready to make a broadside, her bow pointed directly at the Valkyrie's port side. But the poor children were probably frightened by the Yazha's hormone cannon. Lorraine had never seen such a broadside extend further and further before, including the race's earlier attack. And 900 meters to her starboard, the Queen Anne's Revenge. She had already crossed paths with the Valkyrie once, at a very close distance of no more than 120 meters. Neither side's artillery fire had hit the other, but Nacine's black gun had killed one of Lorraine's mainmast sails, causing a period of chaos on the ship. Now she had completed the turn in the distance, and a new round of charge was imminent. The foremast lookout was keeping a close eye on her movements. Unfortunately, since the headlong assault was interrupted, Lorraine's target was no longer her. After all, her speed and agility were not much different from the Valkyrie's, and she was tough and difficult to defeat. Instead of wasting time on her, it would be better to choose other targets that could pose a real threat to the Valkyrie. For example, the Golden Shackles, which was clumsily trying to escape, more than 700 meters ahead. If you had known you were afraid, why did you drop anchor? Lorraine smiled playfully. Prepare the bow gun. Tell Yatrin to pursue love boldly. Chapter 458 The Last Lesson. Open the gun ports, gentlemen. It's time to admire the view. Following Yatrin's command, the Valkyrie's distinctive detachable curved gun ports were removed by the officers, revealing the magnificent ocean scene before the gunners unobstructed. No matter how many times I see it, this scene is always captivating, Yatrin sighed with relief. I've decided. Next time I'll bring my sketchpad aboard so you can witness my flawless painting skills, honed through countless beautiful paintings. Where was the applause? Yatrin held his head high with pride, maintaining the most dignified and reserved posture of a gentleman, anticipating praise, admiration, emotion, and perhaps even a touch of undeserved admiration from his men. But nothing. The atmosphere in Lagoon Bay was eerily quiet. The crash of the bow breaking through the waves mixed with a mist that lingered in the air, muffling even the breath of the people. Yatrin heard the sound of cannon fire. Judging from the angle, it must have been the whirlpool escapes pursuing bowgun colliding with the Queen Anne's Revenge's far side. The Valkyrie didn't even try to evade. The bow portholes couldn't reveal any impact points, and the ship didn't tremble at all. Clearly, they had missed. The closing in continued. The Golden Shackles had given up on escaping, its broadsides densely deployed like a hedgehog, but like the Valkyrie, she was waiting for closer range and a better opportunity. It was the last calm before the storm. Yatrin's lip curled slightly. I know what you're waiting for, gentlemen. Even without looking into your eyes, I can sense your fervent thirst for knowledge, but that shouldn't be your focus. He gently patted the mortar, its calibration complete. The cool touch, radiating from his palm, touched a tender spot. Yatrin suddenly lost interest in the performance. You are outstanding gunners, selected from the entire direct fleet. You reported to the Valkyrie last August, went to Europe in October, and followed me to Africa in December. We've been together for at least 7 months. If your last post was on the Golden Hind, we might have been together for several years. I have good news for you. After this journey, 19 gentlemen will end their sailor careers. 3 of you have been given opportunities to study at advanced schools, 2 will be transferred to the American branch, 3 to the European branch, and the rest will go to Africa. I have signed each of your transfer orders and completed your position evaluations. Except for the 3 trainees and 2 captains, you will all become gunners, just like me. For your final lesson, I will teach you what focus is. God has given gentlemen the responsibility to lead their subordinates and assist their superiors. Focus is your most trustworthy treasure and weapon. Focus. A competent gentleman always knows what he wants. At a ball, when we fall in love with a woman, we need to focus. Focus allows us to let go of shame, hesitation, and the differences in status and position, whether she is a young girl, a married woman, a nun, or a pregnant woman, whether she is a noble, a wealthy man, a waitress, or a prostitute. Nothing can stop us from pursuing their beautiful bodies. As for success or failure, it is simply a matter of technique and detail. On the battlefield, we must also focus, ignoring everything except our opponent. Victory or defeat, life or death, everything you have or will have, is determined by the starting point, so you shouldn't focus on me. Acheron slowly retreated, making room to fire, hiding where he would be less likely to be hit even if the mortar derailed. He cast an encouraging glance at his subordinates. The golden shackles were close, no more than 100 meters away. The enemy began to unleash a saturation barrage on the Valkyrie, causing it to stagger. The closest impact point was only 10 meters from the bow, and the mist obscured the view. However, the curved gun port is of long and narrow design, like a grinning mouth. If Golden Shackles wants to hit such a long and narrow section with the bow swinging up and down, he still needs to hone his shooting skills more. I know, Acheron raised his voice, I know you just satisfied the shy and maternal Miss Lone Traveler half an hour ago and completely conquered her. Your body and mind are tired, and perhaps you can no longer be as full of fighting spirit and passion as just now, but a gentleman must never say no to this issue. Don't forget the responsibilities given to us by God. We once swore to spread love fairly to every lady who is beautiful enough to move our hearts. Look out the window, gentlemen. Next to the window of Miss Lone Traveler is the boudoir of the Spanish lady, and she is looking forward to your visit. She is the most enthusiastic and proactive girl I have ever seen in the world. She is leaning on a balcony surrounded by flowers, her nightgown half off, and her shoulders half exposed. Ask yourself, can you refuse such an alluring Spanish lady? This is your battle. Please bet on the honor and dignity of a gentleman. The holy-looking gunner desses continued to shrink towards the safe corner. Carey, you give the orders. Yes, sir. The auxiliary gunner Carey half knelt behind the mortar with red eyes. Range, Spanish Beauty, range 70, relative speed 3.5 knots, 2 chain shells, range 60, firing angle 74, suppression angle 2. Target Spanish Beauty's foremast and mainmast. Carey, suppressing tears, roared, Beauty, come and love me. The gunners in the bow cabin roared in unison, Beauty, love me, boom, boom. A huge tremor beneath his feet. Lorraine watched 2 huge, red-hot chain shells pass directly over the Golden Shackles freeboard at a near-perfect angle, and with a frantic tone, he barked out orders. Henna. Full rudder left. All ships, avoid collision. Warning list. Henna had been waiting for this order. Upon hearing Lorraine's shout, she shifted the wheel to its lowest position without a word. Click. Only then did she remember to reply. Full rudder left. Sharp turn. List. Less than 40 meters from the Golden Shackles, the Valkyrie veered sharply left. The slender ship tilted almost to the point of capsizing, sending waves crashing like a wall towards the Golden Shackles. The bowsprits of the 2 ships narrowly missed each other. In that moment, Lorraine heard exclamations, screams, and the unique, tooth-wrenching sound of something massive falling. As the hail gradually subsided, Lorraine couldn't wait to rise. Lying on the deck, he urgently called out, observe the effects of the bombardment, report. Edley's voice immediately responded. 1 missed, glancing off the bow. 1 hit straight, breaking the mainmast. Confirmed, the Golden Shackles is disabled. Long live Captain Desses. The tumultuous deck erupted in unbridled cheers. Lorraine rose amid the cheers, finally seeing the Golden Shackles in all its glory. Her mainmast, ripped clean off by Atron's chain bullets, was now heeling to port, pulling countless rigging along with it. However, the attack on the foremast failed, leaving the foremast and mizzenmast intact. The mainmast fell about 20 degrees, suspended in mid-air by the rigging and the masts, causing the entire ship to list severely. The pirates on board were trying to save themselves, and Lorraine saw many pirates desperately climbing the masts. But this unorganized self-rescue looked more like a desperate struggle. The pirates' rush to climb the masts caused the ship's center of gravity to tilt even more to the left, and the further tilt of the ship caused more pirates to climb the masts, trying to quickly untie the broken mainmast. Lorraine suddenly heard gunshots, the sound of the pirates' beloved pistols. A pirate on the mast screamed and fell into the sea, his blood soon forming a streak. Aside from 17 or 18 minor flaws, bullying the weak, fearing the strong, and having an unruly private life, Zheng is truly a perfect subordinate. Lorraine clapped his hands. Well, gentlemen, the same thing, the war is not over yet. 5 degrees to port, turn around, 2/3 sail. The Queen Anne's Revenge is coming aboard, let's go and welcome the respected His Highness Blackbird. P.S. Just like the bow mortar to the British Navy, the sea artillery is the specialty of the Spanish Navy and a model of waste and uselessness. That's why Zheng and the gunners called the Golden Shackles Spanish girls. It has nothing to do with the ship's nationality, crew, or ship type. Special notice. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 459 Just What I Want. After the lone traveler, it seems even the golden shackles are finished. Aboard the Queen Anne's Revenge, Semris, considered the ship's brains, and Zheng Anyue, the acknowledged vice captain, stood together at the railing. Despite the considerable height difference, their expressions were identical, a resentment they tried to conceal the anguish of feeling helpless. Semris stomped his feet twice. You should persuade the captain to retreat. The sooner we retreat, the more vitality our unit can retain. Zheng Anyue raised his eyebrow and glanced at him. Why should I persuade you? On this ship, you are the one using your brain. Before you say such sarcastic words, think about whether you have ever respected the person who uses his brain. You rejected my plan, and you will bear the captain's wrath. You and I both know that the one who really vetoed you has always been the captain. I'm just doing my duty as a guard. Really? Semris drawled out his words playfully. Did I tell you how my uncle died? No, I have an uncle named Shyness. He was a very good deer hunter and had a very useful dog named Yaris. One winter, he took his dog to the woods to hunt deer as usual. As a result, the stupid dog woke up a hibernating bear and, thinking it was loyal, pounced on it. As a result, my uncle became the bear's dinner. When he was found, only his head and half a leg were left. I will never forget that scene. He used his life to tell me that loyal dogs are unreliable. They will do stupid things from time to time. What's even more annoying is that even when they do stupid things, they still think they are just doing their duty. Semris turned around and made a spitting gesture at Zheng Anyue. Zheng, look at the Queen Anne's Revenge. It's wartime. We're risking our lives, and you and I, the ship's pilot, staff officer, and first mate, are idly chatting by the rail. We rushed out, putting our lives on the line to test the white banner of new ship, only to find we were completely helpless. That's all thanks to your self-righteous loyalty. You're far more foolish than Siradicarus. He was only following his uncle deer hunting, and he pounced on a bear, thinking he could protect him. You, on the other hand, can't even tell the difference between a deer and a bear. Go and persuade him, or not, that's your freedom. But Zheng, pirates may fight for many things, but most of the time, loyalty isn't among them. I'd be happy if you could remember that in your foolish mind. The blatant provocation, the undisguised insult, Semris's tongue dripping with poison, couldn't pierce Zheng's heart. Zheng simply stared at Semris in silence for a long moment. Greek, your ideas are dangerous. Perhaps I should have eliminated you beforehand. I was right. You're nothing but a boring old dog. Semris's face was thick with disappointment, almost overflowing with it. Don't worry, no one wants to betray the captain. We only hate you. You, of course it's us, old dog. You've already, enjoy your fear, boys. Semris wanted to continue his venomous attack, but Blackbeard's powerful roar interrupted him mid-sentence. There are no unsinkable warships, And the white banner is certainly not invulnerable. Close to him, entangle him, and confine him. A goat may be able to pierce the stomachs of a wolf or two, but it's still food, and we are the predators. 10 degrees starboard. Use our claws and fangs to shatter the white banner's tortoise shell. Close. Oh. Control the bombardment rate. Keep the range to 100 meters. Detain the Vikings and don't let our companions be disturbed. Captain Frayne leaped on the deck. Minutes earlier, the Helvet had exhausted all its resources, barely managing to deactivate the skua within the timeframe specified by Katerina. The performance was barely satisfactory. While the rookies had successfully freed the skua, the accompanying assault had failed. Mortar fire from 120 meters away was ineffective, and the intense pursuit failed to secure a direct hit, with only one shell glancing off the brigantine's bow. The brigantine fled in a cloud of black smoke, and the battle remained outnumbered, with no turning point in sight. Captain Frayne was deeply dissatisfied with his progress. In his opinion, if the Helvet had even half the combat effectiveness of the Golden Hind during Operation Halloween, with the support of the skua, even if they couldn't sink the brigantine in its engagement with the skua, they would at least have severely damaged it. However, the skua had already retreated before the Helvet could reach its target, allowing the brigantine to escape. Then, the frantic gunner mistakenly fired his bow gun. Like the British Royal Navy, Drake's new ships, starting at level 5, were equipped with mortars of various calibers as their main bow guns. The mortars had a theoretical range of only 150 meters. Firing from 100 meters, even Atrin would have had little chance of hitting their target. The Helvet's shot naturally missed, easily missing its only chance to inflict heavy damage on its adversary. The brigantine gained speed. Although Frayne painstakingly secured another opportunity for a 260-meter broadside attack during the pursuit, the result was still no surprise. When will his men be as reliable as the Golden Hind back then? Frayne felt he could barely muster the energy to curse. The lookout reported that the Valkyrie had scored again from 9 kilometers away. Following the sinking of the Solitaire, it had completely and utterly disabled the Golden Shackles with a classic touch-and-go approach. As a captain trained in the flagship system, Frayne certainly would not expect the Helvet to be able to perform as easily as the Valkyrie when surrounded by powerful enemies. But as the tactical focus of this battle, he knew that the Helvet had fallen far behind in progress. If there was no further progress, Captain, the third mate ran to Frayne's side holding the railing. Vice Admiral, what orders did Admiral Dibbo give? The Vice Admiral asked. The third mate swallowed hard. She asked us to hang the prisoners in the bottom hold immediately, either on the mainmast, foremast or bow. The only requirement is that it must be conspicuous so that the Ericsson can see it at once. Hang. Duriki, Frayne grinned helplessly. It seems that the Vice Admiral is no longer willing to tolerate our poor performance. She wants to drag the battle into the endgame, even if the risk is greater, and does not want to waste Valkyrie's victory. Then what should we do? Of course, follow the Vice Admiral's orders. Frayne gritted his teeth fiercely. Young people need pressure to grow, and the Vice Admiral's orders are exactly what I want. Chapter 460 Go Kill. Slippery. Lorraine, in your eyes, I always seem fit for a supporting role, Bonnet murmured softly. The Battle of Bastaire had begun 1 hour and 20 minutes earlier, and the Ericsson had been in the fray for over 40 minutes. 60 armed merchant ships were locked in a narrow stretch of sea, no more than 15 kilometers long and wide. Their power ratio was 41-19, with 1,028 guns to 530. Of course, fleet strength is never simply measured by the number of ships and guns. The direct fleet possessed far superior offensive and defensive hardware and organizational capabilities to the pirates. The battle was not one-sided, but rather a 50-50 split. 5 battle groups engaged simultaneously. Thus far, the pirates had sunk 1 galleon-class ship, 1 brigantine-class ship, 2 schooner-class ships, damaged 1 bag, 1 fortress-class schooner, 4 brigantine-class ships, and 1 schooner-class ship. The direct fleet suffered far fewer losses, with 2 brig-class ships and 2 brigantines severely damaged. While the brig-class Black-Headed Gull was among the most severely damaged, her hull wasn't seriously damaged. After quickly gathering crews, she joined the Greys group. Therefore, the direct fleet actually lost only 3 ships. From 41-19 to 30-16, the direct fleet's advantage might sound significant, but the tide of battle hadn't fundamentally changed. Furthermore, The physical strain of mobile warfare was vastly different from the prevailing semi-stationary bombardment and ocean pursuit. The direct fleet's crews were severely inexperienced in actual combat, and even Lorraine wasn't sure how long their resolve would hold out. A quick victory. It had unwittingly become the shared desire of the heavily damaged pirates and the prevailing Drakes. The Helvet's failed assault on the brigantine had reorganized the main battle group into a more distinct formation. From northwest to southeast, to the north stood the lucky ship that had escaped death, its bow smoking. Slightly to the south lay Ericsson's two other escort ships, and then the sole remaining schooner. Ericsson and Alvite faced each other, 500 meters east and west. Further south of Alvite lay the Skua and the Sea Parrot, hiding in the shadows awaiting orders. Bonnet's two brigantines were lightly damaged, while the Alvite and the Skua on the Katharina side were lightly hit, but otherwise suffered no significant damage. Ericsson pressed towards Alvite for the fifth time, her bow gun firing impatiently just as she entered the 300-meter line. Alvite chose to evade without hesitation, turning her bow and swerving to the far side, leading the Skua and Sea Parrot as she had done before, giving Ericsson no chance to close in. Bonnet watched it all unfold, almost as if time had reversed, returning to the days when he first met Lorraine in Stavanger. It was a similar scene back then. Aboard the Gemini, he and Leif had both awakened their berserker bloodline. Though their strengths were comparable, Lorraine had unhesitatingly chosen Leif as his opponent, leaving him to Henna. This wasn't to say Henna's combat prowess was necessarily inferior to Lorraine's, the problem lay in Viking instinct. Within their souls lay a ravenous monster that preyed on powerful enemies. In battle, they considered nothing beyond life and death, honor and disgrace. It was an instinct, one that even a brilliant businessman like Lorraine couldn't suppress. His choice of Leif back then meant he considered him stronger than Bonnet. His choice of Blackbeard now meant he considered Blackbeard a greater threat than Bonnet. Bonnet hated the feeling of being looked down upon, but Lorraine had never given him his full attention. If only I had taken out Henna Yesla back then, Bonnet fumed, watching Yalvet, who couldn't close the distance. The first mate strode over from the rear deck. "Captain, the lookout reports, our prince has lost another ship. The mainmast of the Golden Shackles is broken and it is disabled." Bonnet's eyebrows jumped. "So fast?" "Lorraine is still unharmed," the first mate said with a beaming eyebrow. "Boss Arneson is really unstoppable this time." After killing the Golden Shackles, he set his sights on the Queen Anne's revenge. "The old brothers all think that Blackbeard is doomed this time. If possible, should we, Leif is on Lorraine's ship, Captain." "No," the first mate's voice trembled, "Leif Erikson is on Boss Arneson's ship." Bonnet's expression was cold. "Vikings worship heroes, so I don't mind you respecting Lorraine Arneson. But he has made his choice, and you have made your choice too. Only one of us is destined to survive, so tell the old brothers to put away the luck. If there is only one fleet in the Caribbean that needs us to fight desperately, it must be the Drake Chamber of Commerce. Yes, and..." Bonnet suddenly stopped talking midway. He squinted his eyes and looked across the sea. On the Alvet, a group of sailors were shouting slogans to hoist someone onto the mast. "Binoculars," he said to the first mate with his back to him. The first mate quickly took out a telescope and handed it to Bonnet. "Captain, what's going on?" "Shut up." Bonnet raised the telescope to his eyes, and soon, the lens was covered with a strange hanging ceremony. "That man seems a little familiar." Bonnet followed Alvet's trajectory. Eagle eyes, curly mustache, 30 years old, listless. "It's Delicky the handyman." "Captain, you were right." Delicky the handyman was hidden on the Vice Admiral's ship by the head of Arneson. It turned out to be him. Bonnet was stunned. Rescuing the skilled Delicky was Blackbeard's primary purpose in inviting the Skull Bay pirates, but Bonnet hadn't previously taken the matter seriously. He'd agreed to Blackbeard's request simply to capitalize on Blackbeard's favorable winds to kill Lorraine in these waters, or at least severely injure her. But now, an excuse suddenly appeared. Alvet lifted Delicky from the hold and draped it unassumingly from the mainmast. The sling was neither too long nor too short, neither dangling nor touching the ground, looking like a human shield. Lorraine would have guessed Blackbeard's goal was to capture the prisoners. His vice admiral's actions were a warning to the pirates. No one was allowed to throw cannonballs onto Alvet's deck. But Alvet's previous tactics had been passive, and with that cautious approach, landing a cannonball on Alvet's deck wouldn't be easy. So, suddenly, Alvet slipped out of the telescope's lens. Bonnet suddenly opened his other eye. "She's changed direction." The lookout's voice echoed across the deck, target changing direction. 10 degrees to port, the angle is widening, target is slowing down. Alert, engagement in 2 minutes. The first mate's mouth dropped slightly. Trying to digest this series of unexpected changes, Captain, why do I feel like Yalvet seems to be inviting us to come closer? It's an invitation. Bonnet threw away the first mate's binoculars. It seems they have their own difficulties that we don't know about. The decisive battle is about to begin. Sink them, he emphasized each word, saying, only by sinking them, sinking her, can we challenge Lorraine and his iron turtle. So, Vikings, pull up the sails, and go kill. Silence. Then. Chapter 461 Mirror Image. Port side hit, evade, beware of the risk of a roll. Captain, full starboard rudder, list alarm. Full starboard rudder, turn sail. The Alvet veered sharply to starboard, a hail of shells tearing through the stern waves, breaking old ones and creating new ones. The ship was tossed to the ground. Crew members, unable to stand, screamed and tumbled across the deck, some colliding with their heads against the hard protrusions, creating huge gashes and pouring blood. But the roll alarm had been heard before, once at the helm and once on the deck. Even the most deaf person couldn't have missed both. Only fools who mistook the waist rope for a steadying force would fall in such a situation, completely ignoring the fact that the rope was flexible. Frayne clutched the foremast's grip tightly when he suddenly felt the ship vibrate unnaturally. His face immediately tensed, and he strained his neck to shout, "The ship's been hit." Sailor. Sailor confirms the damage. The ship's list finally leveled out, and the Ericsson's intensive bombardment had come to an end. A sailor, clutching his forehead, climbed out of the hold, his face smeared with sweat. Report, the hull has been hit midsection between the 7th and 8th gun ports on the port side. It's a new location, and there's no damage inside. Frayne finally relaxed. It had only been a mere 15 minutes since they officially approached, and Alvet had offered no resistance to Ericsson. The battle was hopelessly one-sided, and Frayne braced himself for a piercing and sinking attack at any moment. Even if it happened at any moment, he wouldn't be surprised. The Ericsson, worthy of being the flagship of Pirate King candidate Bonnet, was proficient in both a mid-range and close-range combat, its combat power firmly surpassing the strongest ship Frayne had ever faced as captain, the lone traveler, recently dismembered by the Valkyrie. Catalina's idea was completely useless. She said that by hanging the bounty-bearing pirates from the handy pirates, they could act like carrots to lure the Ericsson closer. Once close, these pirates hanging low on the masts would make the Vikings hesitant, minimizing the gap in crew quality between the two sides. But what was the result? Frayne hanged 7 people, including the fore, middle, and aft masts, with Handy Dariki in the most prominent position. Who knew that the barbaric Viking didn't care about the safety of his captives at all? The blood-soaked meat on the mizzen deck was proof of that. The core cadre of the crafty pirates, the helmsman Gutitali, was minced into pulp by a high-flying chain bullet, and Alvet's sailboom was also minced with him. This injury directly caused Alvet's speed to drop by 2 knots, and her flexibility was reduced by more than half. Fortunately, even if the sail is broken, Alvet's speed is still faster than Ericlin. Since hostage warfare is useless, let's keep pulling away, Captain. Captain Frayne, the Admiral's staff came over at a trot, shouting as he ran. Admiral Dibble ordered that Alvet must not leave the Ericsson 100 meters without orders. Your ship must hold the opponent tightly and prevent it from threatening the skew and the puffin. Frayne was stunned on the spot, not allowed to leave. Yes. The Admiral means that even if Alvet is sunk, the mission must be completed to create conditions for the skew and the puffin to plant branches on the enemy. The mission must be completed even if it is sunk. Frayne's face flushed. Catalina saw him retreating. The crew's inexperience was clearly evident under the pressure of the Ericsson, and he had indeed begun to consider retreating. He figured that with Alvet's superior maneuverability, as long as they could drag it out safely until the end and wait for the Valkyrie to return victorious. This was perfectly normal. It is human nature to be afraid of death. Even if Alvet shoulders an important responsibility in this battle, even if his retreat is likely to cause Ericsson to lose the connection, and eventually led to the complete collapse of the 4 main battle groups that have been at their limit. Also, Frayne gritted his teeth. Are the skew and the Sea Parrot going to counterattack those brigantines? This is exactly why the Admiral asked you to release the combat power of the skew, 2 against 1, to pincer attack Ericsson's wing ships. The Admiral judges that you need to hold on for at least 3 hours. Admiral. Which ship is Admiral Dippo going to command the pincer attack? The Admiral will stay on Alvet, and Captain Erickson will also stay on your ship. Admiral, please rest assured that she will not seize your command. If Alvet sinks in battle, she will not accept the treatment of a prisoner. Sink with the ship. Sink with the ship. Sink with the ship. Sink with the ship. Bang! Frayne slammed his fist on the hard-painted surface of the foremast. The lookout shouted as if he heard the signal, "Erickson is approaching, avoid the fire." The crew looked at Frayne in panic. There was fire on Frayne's face. Put up 3/4 sail, speed up, rudder left 10 degrees, prepare to cut Erickson's side at 80 meters, whoosh, whoosh, his breathing became more and more rapid, prepare the port gun port. Seize the opportunity, this is the T-tail saturation that the entire ship has fought hard for you, don't waste it, pass the captain's order, fight to the death, all ship, raise the sails. 3/4 sail, put up 3/4 sail, cut into the wind and speed up, cut into the wind belt, current speed 4.5, continuously increasing, prepare for port artillery fire, upper layer scattered shells, lower layer solid, odd number gun ports in pursuit are free, gunners can control the firing time by themselves, no need to report again, free artillery fire on the port side, received, current speed is 5 knots, 160 meters away from the stern of Queen Anne's Revenge, relative speed 1.5, facing each other, 4-minute countdown for artillery fire, odd numbers are ready, even numbers are on standby. Prepare for artillery fire, range 100 meters, Queen Anne's Revenge, stern gun, right 5, amidst the shouts. Lorraine had unknowingly reached Henna's side and whispered the order in a voice neither loud nor impassioned. Henna turned the handwheel without a word. The Valkyrie shifted its course slightly, its sharp bow piercing the mist created by the Queen Anne's stern guns, closing the distance between them to 60 meters. Any able-bodied person could easily run 60 meters in under 12 seconds. The Valkyrie couldn't achieve the rapid short-range acceleration of a human, so it would take another minute to catch up with the Queen Anne. After a minute, the odd-numbered guns would fire first, continuously firing ammunition into small areas they pursued. By the time the odd-numbered guns had finished firing, the Valkyrie would have completely caught up with the Queen Anne. Only then would the even-numbered guns begin their saturation fire mode. This was the close-in bombardment plan delivered to Lorraine by the gun bay. If Lorraine remembered correctly, this elaborate and bizarre pursuit bombardment plan seemed to be Atron's original creation. The name of the plan was, "Let the lady feel fresh all night?" Lorraine had the urge to laugh. The French really don't know how to name plans or actions. Isn't the name of the person quite nice? The last 40 meters. Lorraine leaned against the side of the ship and stretched out her hand, making a pinching gesture towards the Queen Anne who was close at hand. The Valkyrie had cut to 30 meters outside her starboard side and was parallel to her. If she could catch up for a few more seconds, then... Lorraine suddenly saw a galleon coming out from the end of her vision. Judging from the bow image, it was the most haunting vortex escape in this battle. She suddenly broke out of the shadow of the Queen Anne's Revenge, and with a beautiful move, she just pinched the Valkyrie's T-tail, and formed a special mirror-like, 7, shape with the Queen Anne. And the Valkyrie was exactly at the angle of 7. Lorraine broke out in a cold sweat. Henna, full right, avoid. Full ship roll alarm. Collision warning, full right rudder, avoid, avoid. Chapter 462 Meeting an Angel. Through the narrow porthole, the tiny Queen Anne's Revenge overlapped with a giant thumb, rocking gently with the waves. Distance 160, bearing southeast-southeast, facing port, 30 meters parallel, angle less than 3, parallel. Atron breathed a sigh of relief, straightened up, and casually brushed his spotless knees with his hips raised. I declare the captain a friend of artillery, even if there are 17 or 18 minor issues, it doesn't matter. No one is perfect. If the captain were truly perfect, what would we crew members do? After watching the accompanying mate finish recording all the data, Atron took the writing board, found a sail chair, and crossed his legs. 1.4 meter side elevation difference, 3-stage thickness, deck guns exposed, upper deck crews. By the way, tell the captain that the current situation is perfect and requires no changes. Please maintain stability. Also, determine the relative speeds of both sides, the current speed differential, and the speed differential once in position. Gunfire is an art, gentlemen, art is explosion, yes. After saluting, the mate rushed out of the cabin. Atron rode on the clipboard for a moment, then looked up. Information down below: upper deck shotgun, firing angle 4 degrees, lower deck solid, firing angle 0 degrees, all port gun ports ready for firing, standby time no more than 5 minutes. The gun bay was bustling with activity. The gun carriage's track locks were unlocked, and as an alternative security measure, 2 securing cables were added to each gun, allowing the gun to slide back approximately 4 meters, completing the tactical maneuver of muzzle loading. Many, due to his reputation, misunderstood Acheron, believing him to be a heartless gunner whose sole lifelong desire was to shoot. In reality, this assessment was biased. He was a machine gunner, to be sure, but he was no believer in the theory of results. He always upheld the maxims of probability, insisting that as long as there was a possibility of an accident, it would definitely happen. The gun bay's motto was safety first, requiring double the standard for fixation, daily cleaning of the gun rails, and constant tidying of debris. Of all the functional areas on the ship, the gun bay's cleanliness was second only to the carpentry shop, a rarity worldwide. Lorraine had always paid close attention to the galley's condition. The sanitation under Wang Yi's command was top-notch, and Acheron's control area was exceptional. Cleaning, charging, reloading, and priming, each gun adjusted its firing angle to Acheron's specifications, and the dark barrel was pushed back out of the port. Carrie and another assistant gunner separately began the final calibration. Acheron clapped his hands and gathered the gunners in the bay to his side. "Let the ladies experience a whole night of novelty, gentlemen. This is our joint creation. I'm sure, like me, you've fantasized about the spectacular spectacle of this tactic being deployed more than once. My biggest regret now is that we're not the first team in the world to pull off this magnificent tactic. In Africa, the boys from the Special Forces had already tasted it before us. You all know Pierce Artis, right? Our esteemed Vice President, Admiral of the Special Forces, the board's most beloved young man. He gave our creation the highest praise, which is," Acheron gave a lewd smile, selling out his official position. He was terrified. The entire cabin roared with laughter. "All right, gentlemen, Admiral Artis is still young. He hasn't had the chance to see a real lady in bed, in a carriage, on the grass, or on the city walls. He's unsophisticated, so we have to forgive his fuss, but we can't do this." The deputy trotted over and whispered something to him. He nodded and smiled. "Range 60, steady course, flawless. Let us praise God and offer a blessing to our great captain, who has created the perfect conditions for a bombardment. Now, take your positions. 1 minute left. Prepare, evade." Faintly, Acheron seemed to hear a heart-wrenching cry from beyond the wall, a voice both strange and familiar, distant and yet close. It seemed to be Lorraine's. But Lorraine had never before been so out of control. Even when he charged the pansy against the reindeer, he had shown restraint and self-possession. Could something have happened? His mind raced, and Acheron was about to send someone up on deck to inquire about the situation when the entire ship suddenly tilted sideways. The angle was so steep, and the speed so rapid. In just half a second, the ship had tilted over 15 degrees. Unprepared for the unexpected, Acheron and his gunners were sent flying like discarded toys, arms and legs stretched out, flying backwards. Acheron watched helplessly as one of his favorite secondary guns slammed headfirst into the gun bay's support column, its head exploding with a thud, its neck twisted at a bizarre, exaggerated angle. Carrie had a slightly better fate than the secondary gunner. He flew high into the pile of gunpowder stacked against the bulkhead, his arm caught on the metal ring of the gunpowder barrel, and with a swish, a large chunk of flesh was torn off, sending blood splattering everywhere. Carrie screamed in agony. His screams blended with a chorus of screams, propelling Acheron backwards, crashing into the crash netting between the support columns. The rough ropes pricked Acheron, causing him to groan. Before he could recover, a dozen more burly men dropped from the sky, screaming like fledglings. Bang! The first knee struck Acheron in the stomach. Bang! The second elbowed him in the chest. The third, fourth, fifth, and sixth fell on either side of him, squeezing him like a pincer, immobilizing him. The seventh soared exceptionally high, arcing like a crossbow bolt, and with a thud, it struck Acheron squarely in the nose. For a moment, Acheron felt like he'd fallen into lemon hell, 1,000 sour sensations irritating his tear film, and his nose immediately began to flow. Crack! A crisp sound. Broken? Falling off? Lifting off the ground? A heavy object? Through his tearful eyes and haze, Atron saw a dark figure soar through the gap in the crowd. Its shape, its roundness, seemed unmatched, save for the 32-pound cannon at Gate 7. Oh my god, the derailed cannon slammed into the crowd like a battering ram. Without a scream, unable to move, they huddled together on the crash net, watching the cannon hurtle toward them. Was he going to die? Was he going to die? Was he doomed? Life flashed before Yatron's eyes like a revolving lantern, past hundreds of shy beauties of varying figures, finally settling on that sunny afternoon, on the verdant grass of Bordeaux. Cecilia, adorned with a garland and a wedding dress, was a picture of beauty. She seemed to glow, her holy, pure white wings spread from behind, filling the sky with velvet plumes. Ah! Tighten. The safety line, pulled tight. The heavy gun, like a giant hammer swinging, slammed into the solid ground of the gun bay with unparalleled force, landing mere inches from the nearest gunner. The roll finally settled. Carey, with a pale face, dragged his injured arm and crawled to the pile of people led by Yatron, gunner commander. Gunner commander, ah! A heartfelt sigh rose from the crowd, and Yatron's eyes were filled with tears. Thank God, if it weren't for your mercy, I would almost forget that I had met an angel. Carey was about to faint from blood loss, but when he heard Yatron's prayer, he no longer felt sleepy. Captain, are you thinking of Lady Cecilia? Not lady, but an angel, Yatron cried and pushed away the stinky men on her body. In that wedding blessed by God, Cecilia shone like an angel. Compared to her, that girl is too shy and too dim, hiding on the other side of that light, like a flawless gem buried deep in the center of the earth. Her medium-length curly chestnut hair is well-behaved and restrained, and the freckles on her face set off her youthful but spring-like face. And the teardrop mole at the corner of her eye, even though her whole body is overshadowed by Cecilia's radiance, that beautiful teardrop mole is still successfully branded in the depths of my soul. Until now, the appearance of flesh and blood flowing in black lines on the floor of the gun cabin. Carey stammered and asked, Captain, you are thinking of other women even when you are looking back. What do you mean by other women? Yatron was very angry. She was one of the bridesmaids that day, Cecilia's beautiful bestie. It's unbelievable. She was right within my reach, but because of shyness, she just avoided my sight, and we missed each other perfectly. Even God wouldn't allow such a tragedy to happen, but God, I made a big mistake. I didn't even ask for her name. Shame, shame, shame. Chapter 463. Don't be polite. The gentle grassy slope suddenly gave way to a torrential mudslide, nearly burying the people in the desolate mountains and forests. The sudden appearance of the vortex escape left Lorraine with a sense of abruptness and shock. It was a trap. The towering Queen Anne's Revenge, with its size and continuous scattershot, deliberately concealed the vortex escape. Overly relaxed, coupled with black-beard's sharpshooter, Narshin, made the Valkyrie's mast the most vulnerable point on the ship. As a result, Lorraine received no advance warning until the vortex escape suddenly appeared. The Valkyrie wasn't fast, compared to her maximum speed of over 14 knots, her speed of 6 to 6.5 knots was less than half of her limit. But as with later battle cruisers of similar effectiveness, the more powerful a ship possessed, the more vulnerable its hull structure became. This vulnerability had nothing to do with its inherent defensive capabilities. The Valkyrie's defenses came from its thick oak timbers and the metal coverings, including upper iron armor and lower copper cladding. These made the Valkyrie largely impervious to the artillery fire of the era, but Lorraine didn't even dream of withstanding a collision of several thousand tons on the ocean. Furthermore, the latticework supporting the armor would deform and disintegrate in a collision, and the twisted thin steel would in turn become a weapon damaging the hull, causing more severe grautier damage than other ships. This clearly showed that the Valkyrie was ill-suited for boarding, a consensus shared by all the ship's designers. It's about to collide. At this critical moment, the unconditional trust cultivated over the years between Hannah and Lorraine played a crucial role. Hannah didn't question the abrupt command, or perhaps before her brain could react, her hands and mouth had already responded to Lorraine's instructions with impeccable accuracy. Full starboard. The Valkyrie swerved sharply, yawing within the maximum possible distance with a sharp starboard turn, successfully slicing past the vortex escape's bow and across the starboard. The two ships crossed, and before the Valkyrie, which had just stabilized, could catch its breath, the Queen Anne's Revenge pressed down from its high port position. The vortex escape, which had just passed it, moved to the starboard side, taking advantage of the Valkyrie's stall to close in with all its might. Lookouts also located the Lee and the Tempest. The lair was closing in on the vortex escape, while the tempest had completely broken away from the formation. Following its trajectory, it would soon, like the vortex escape, circle from the far side and be directly in front of the Valkyrie. Another unlucky suicide truck. Lorraine gasped softly. Normally, the best way to deal with a suicide truck is to avoid it, but after the previous accidental full port rudder, the Valkyrie was in dire straits. This dire situation wasn't entirely superficial. On the Valkyrie's exposed deck, most of the sailors responded instantly to the alarm. While there were no definitive statistics, based on what he saw and heard, Lorraine estimated that no more than 3 people had fallen overboard from the previous list. After the list subsided, the crew, accustomed to large events, quickly returned to their duties. The handymen busied themselves clearing the mess on deck and retaking control of the sails. However, the Valkyrie's sailing was erratic, lurching from side to side like a drunk on the dock. Was it a problem with its center of gravity? Lorraine scanned the ship and spotted Kren and 2 crewmen hastily exiting the hold. He called out to Edley. Immediately determine the damage at each station and report it to me as quickly as possible. Yes, Edley had barely finished replying when the lookout interrupted. Starboard side closing in. Queen Anne's Revenge, attack, evade, Edley. Lorraine's eyes froze. Go now. Yes. After watching Edley go, Lorraine's gaze quickly tracked to the Queen Anne's Revenge, which was approaching from the rear. Less than 300 meters away, a destroyer would have opened fire with their broadsides by now. But there was no response from the gun bays, a dead zone. Lorraine became increasingly certain that something was wrong with Acheron, and immediately called to Henna. Keep 5 to 10 degrees of rudder to port, Henna. Raise or freeboard and maneuver conservatively. 5 degrees of rudder to port, stability first. I'll manage. The port attack arrived. The vortex escape attempted to circle from a range of about 500 meters. The gun bay finally broke its silence and fired sporadic scatter shots at 450 meters. Just 3 shots, but enough to drive the vortex escape off its course, further widening the gap between the two. Starboard fire. The Queen Anne's Revenge finally reached a suitable firing position and saturated the air at about 120 meters. A hail of bullets poured down like a torrential rain, following the Valkyrie's trajectory and pelting down wildly on both sides. The Valkyrie slowly moved through the hail. Lorraine first heard a thud, then the ship shuddered, and a large, twisted piece of armor flew up, crashing into the sea with a crash. Lorraine snorted. More than a dozen guns fired at full speed, but the direct hit was just one of the 2 32-pound guns. That god is too partial to his own believers. Is this the political correctness of heaven? Hina pulled the handwheel and pursed her lips. Be it God or man, belief in God is inherently narrow-minded, although it's true, the channel is blocked. The storm ocean is cutting in 500 meters in front. Hina, turn right 10 degrees, cut into the Queen Anne's side, and guard against close-range attacks. Hina turned the steering wheel into place expressionlessly, and the Valkyrie twisted on the sea to draw an S-shaped trajectory, stopped moving away from the Queen Anne's Revenge, and turned to cut in towards its bow. Until the hull stabilized, she asked Lorraine, aren't you worried that Blackbeard will directly ram you with the flagship? He wouldn't dare. Lorraine licked her dry lips. When playing chess, using a soldier to exchange for the king is undoubtedly a clever move. But if Blackbeard reveals his king in order to deal with the opponent's king, then he is too stupid. Playing chess, Hina tilted her head. Persian chess, almost. Are there chess pieces representing the assassins? Probably not. Lorraine laughed dryly. Why, do you want to learn? Father taught my brother before, but not me, Hina said with a clear expression. It turns out that there are no assassins in chess. He knows I don't like it. Valkyrie cut across the board, and the Queen Anne's Revenge evaded as Lorraine expected. The two sides were separated by more than 20 meters and formed a brief parallel advance. The Valkyrie did not fire a single shot. And because the Queen Anne's Revenge had just carried out a saturated bombardment, it could only watch such a good opportunity slip away. All quiet on the Western Front. Lorraine thought of this ridiculous phrase for no reason. He and Blackbeard looked at each other across the narrow sea. Blackbeard grinned at Lorraine, showing his mouth full of burnt yellow teeth. Lorraine also grinned. Your Highness. Yellow teeth are a manifestation of vitamin deficiency. You may not understand what vitamins are, but it doesn't matter, because people who lack them will not live long. The voice passed through the sea and the sea breeze to Blackbeard's ship. Blackbeard's face turned black. He gritted his teeth and said, English boy, I will tear you apart. Come on. Lorraine stretched out his thumb and made a virtual stroke on his neck. Don't be polite. Chapter 464 Natural Defects. After a precious minute of peace, the Valkyrie and Queen Anne's Revenge tacitly turned left and right, re-establishing distance between them in the vast ocean. Adley's damage tally had finally arrived. Among the key sailor gathering areas, 2 sailors were seriously injured and 3 fell overboard on the deck during the evasive maneuver. 1 was seriously injured in the mess hall, and 2 were seriously injured in the hold. The vast majority of casualties were concentrated on the port side, during the standby phase. Because the recoil of heavy guns was too strong for wooden decks to withstand for long, all naval guns over 24 pounds were equipped with recoil dispersing devices. The Valkyrie's gun carriage was of the British type, utilizing rails and wheels for both rapid reloading and recoil control. When in standby, most of the mountings were removed to prevent the guns from interfering with the ship's navigation during the ejection process. This evasive maneuver happened to occur on the port side during the saturated standby phase. Everything was in turmoil. The 3rd, 4th, 7th, 10th, 12th and 14th guns in the main battery compartment were derailed, and the 1st, 3rd, 4th and 7th secondary guns on the upper deck were derailed, ultimately resulting in 23 deaths and 37 serious injuries. This result was far beyond Lorraine's expectations. He stood there with a frown and asked Adley, "Has First Mate Scott gone down to the cabin?" "Yes." "What did he say?" "The first mate said that there are now 10 gun barrels and countless shells rolling around on our port side, completely destroying the center of gravity of the ship. Valkyrie's speed will be reduced by at least 40%. Turning more than 10 degrees will become a dangerous maneuver. The combat capability of the port side will be completely lost, and how to deal with it? The first mate and the gunner organized the shipwrights and gunners to clean up the messy port side. Everything that can be collected will be collected. If it cannot be collected, it will be reinforced on the spot according to the first mate's calculations. How long will it take him? 60 to 80 minutes. During this period, not only will the port side be unable to fight back, but a large number of personnel will be withdrawn from the starboard side, and only 3 guns will be guaranteed to disperse the enemy. Only 3. Lorraine's face was full of depression. "That is to say, I broke my left hand when I rolled over, and the first mate is going to tie up my right hand as well in order to keep me rested." The first mate said this is to let Valkyrie recover its ability to run as soon as possible. "We are outnumbered now, and he thinks speed and stability are more important than firepower." 20 minutes, huh? Lorraine held up 2 fingers. "Go tell the first mate that I agree with his opinion, but he doesn't have an hour, only 20 minutes, except for the deck. All the personnel on the ship are at his disposal, even if not a single gun is left. But after 20 minutes, I must see Valkyrie recovered, even if there is only 1 gun, and the port side must regain its ability to attack." "Yes." Adley was sent to the gun room again. As soon as he left, Lorraine rubbed his temples. Henna was on shift. She handed the steering wheel to the substitute helmsman and walked behind Lorraine as usual. "Aren't you going to look for Noah?" Lorraine shook his head. "There is no substitute for me on the ship, and I need to stay tense until the battle is over." "Really?" Henna whispered. "I didn't expect that an emergency evasion would have such a big impact on Valkyrie. If I had expected it earlier, I would have tried to leave some buffer." "It can't be left." Lorraine sighed. "The problem with the Valkyrie is the overly large sail area and overly narrow aspect ratio. These high-speed designs are naturally the natural enemies of ship stability, but on the other hand, her displacement is 2,500 tons, which exceeds most second-level ships and is close to the first-level ships of Bayman. If we give up these designs, we can't let her maintain her current high speed and flexibility. I chose the former between fast and stable, and the current situation is as expected, but how can I say it? Actual combat is indeed the best place to test ships. Although we thought of Valkyrie's weaknesses when discussing her, we never thought that the opponent would be able to find a way to deal with it so quickly. This is Valkyrie's first battle in the Caribbean." Hannah walked up and gently held Lorraine's hand. "You thought of the problem, don't you have a solution? Design flaws can't be remedied by operational skill. Whether you, Bell, or I were at the helm, the outcome would be the same if we encountered the same situation." Lorraine returned Hannah's hand, giving it a gentle squeeze as a gesture of comfort. "We've prepared a specialized 2-ship strategy for the Valkyrie. The project for the lady was originally initiated with this in mind. Unfortunately, man proposes, fate disposes. Someone has to handle the African mission. Pierce is the perfect person, and the lady is the most suitable flagship for him." the one that maximizes profits. The Valkyrie's need for a companionship can only be fulfilled in a year. Before that, we must overcome Blackbeard. The greater his losses, the more peaceful our year will be. It would be even better if we could take him out here. After all, only a dead pirate is a truly good pirate. Go and rest. Lorraine patted Hina's arm. This battle will be long. I promise you won't miss it. Main camp. The Skua and the Sea Parrot were desperately pursuing a sleek brigantine. Over half an hour had passed since they received the order to depart. Nearby, the Helvet, battered by intense fire, fought tooth and nail. However, they had failed the Helvet's desperate fight, achieving nothing since the start of the battle. No one knew how much longer the Helvet could hold out against the Ericsson's might. She might sink in a second, or be successfully boarded by the fierce Vikings, leading to a brutal boarding battle. The pruning mission must be completed quickly. The two young captains were frantic, their efforts becoming increasingly chaotic. The brigantine, their target, was running at breakneck speed. The Skua pursued from the port side, while the Puffin cut in from the port side. Not only did they fail to find a suitable angle for their fire, they also blocked the Skua, forcing their allies to abandon the wind and swerve to evade. The Skua's speed stalled, and the brigantine vanished into thin air. The Skua's captain, looking dejectedly at his old friend, who kept bowing across the sea, spoke in a voice only he could hear. I should have chosen the brigantine with a damaged bow. Is that the price of greed? The captain waved to his old friend. Let's go back and prioritize cutting off the damaged ships around the Ericsson. We can one by one. The old friend nodded in agreement. The two ships turned their bows on the vast sea, and just as they were about to launch an assault on the damaged ship, an alarm suddenly came. Report, enemy ship brigantine number 1, approaching at high speed at 1.2 kilometers from the north-northeast. Brigantine number 2, damaged ship, 5.3 kilometers from the southwest. Brigantine number 3, 800 from the south-southeast. Bah, the lookout widened his eyes. A beige type has been spotted, 3.3 kilometers from the northeast. The other battle groups have missed their ships. Also, the Ericsson successfully boarded Helvet. The boarding battle has begun. Chapter 465, One generation is worse than the next. Bang, 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 bang. Replace, guns raised, fire, bang, 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 bang. Replace, guns raised, send the prisoners to the bottom hold, form a formation, advance, and hold the line, look out. The hooks are coming. At the main battlefront of the Battle of Bastère, Ericsson and Helvet, the two leading men and women of this drama, were practically touching each other. Less than 5 meters apart, the daring advance team swung towards them, screaming and swiping, leaping across the sea creek, brandishing their long swords. Stormtrooper Captain Stedgren charged the most fiercely, wielding a massive yoke like a feather duster, landing on board and smashing a sailor's head with a single blow. Vivid blood and brain matter splattered his head and face, and a headless body lay twitching at his feet. The terrifying scene, like a demon descending, terrified the young sailors nearby, and a brief chaos descended on Helvet's deck. This hesitation proved fatal. By the time Captain Freen regrouped, the Helvet had lost most of its port side. Over a dozen men lay dead, their lives uncertain. At least 30 pirates had secured their footing on the deck. The reckless Sturgren grinned, licking up the dribbling brains. "Pa. Boys, leave no one alive." He led the pirates in a powerful assault on the Helvet. Sturgren was at the forefront, his men screaming and soaring with every step. Blood splattered like ink, and the sound of bones snapping could be heard throughout the ship. In just a few breaths, he reached the mainmast. Derek hung before him, his once sharp eagle eyes white from the inhumane treatment he endured. He looked like a half-dried, salted fish. "He's a big pirate too," Stedgren scoffed dismissively. He pulled a knife from his pocket and was about to rescue the pirates when a sudden warning flashed through his mind. "Musketeers, ready, aim, fire, bang, 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 bang." At the critical moment, Katerina assembled a squadron of 30 musketeers and opened fire from atop the poop. She divided the musketeers into two groups, one in front, one in the rear, firing in shifts of 10 seconds. This number was more than enough for the cramped fifth-tier ship. A barrage of lead bullets rained down on the pirates from above, knocking down 7 in the blink of an eye. Stedgren's premonition saved his life. At the moment the gunfire rang out, he swiftly lifted up Delaki to block it. As expected, Katerina was cautious. Aside from a missed shot that struck Delaki in the shoulder, All her bullets were kept away from him, fearing that a single misstep would turn the stakes into a skewered sausage. The pirates' casualties mounted rapidly. Captain Frane's counterattack arrived just in time, forcing Stedgerin to abandon his prize and retreat to port with his remaining men. Bang, bang, bang. The Ericsson's firepower finally responded. Bonnet, improvising a dozen skilled pirates, opened fire on the poop with their limited muskets of various types. Their first volley was a lucky shot that blew a musketeer's head off. Catalina was forced to dedicate half her men to suppressing the enemy's musketry, weakening the firepower on the cover deck. Bonnet's first mate, Julius, seized the opportunity and ordered the pirates to cast their grappling hooks. 40 or 50 grappling hooks were thrown overboard, latching onto the Alvet's freeboard and deck. With chance, the pirates closed the gap between the two ships. Biotin, charge. The first pirate boarded, his Viking leather shield raised, and stepped onto the pirate control deck. Then came the second, the third. Bonnet slowly drew Harold the Merciless's sword, gripped his ancestor's steel shield, and suddenly accelerated, leaping high over the railings of both ships, crashing down onto the deck of the Orvet like a titan descending from the sky. 3 brave sailors formed a formation and rushed towards him. Bonnet raised his shield to deflect a sailor's knife. With a flash of light, the sword pierced the second sailor's heart, pushing him forward, and crashing into the third sailor with a thud. The 2 men fell backward like tumbling melons. Bonnet turned, tilting his head to avoid the sailor's knife, which was regrouping. The bloody hilt of the sword struck the sailor's nose, crushing half of his face. The third sailor struggled to his feet, only to discover the tragic death of his 2 colleagues. He was terrified and stared blankly at Bonnet approaching with an expressionless face. Then, a silver light flashed and the whole world began to spin. Julius, Bonnet wiped the sword clean on the headless corpse, pick 20 people to go to the cabin with me, and leave the rest to Stedgerin. I only want the ship, not the people. Yes. The distance to the port side is 350, the Romance is saturated, the vortex escape and the lead are approaching on the starboard side, the distance is 130, 160, speed up and go around, tisk. The dignified pirate king acts like a rogue, Lorraine pouted, maintain half sail, 5 degrees left, aim the bow at the Romance, and remove the gun port. Edley immediately issued the order loudly, and after the order was given, he suddenly reacted, President, isn't 5 degrees to port too close to the impact area? Yes. Lorraine had a mischievous expression on his face, we pretend to advance in a straight line and bring her into the firing range of the bow gun. It's like we hold the sword horizontally and slowly, step by step, stab her throat. The choice is hers to continue the saturation fire. Given her clumsiness, the Valkyrie will reach the optimal range for her bow guns once she's halfway through her saturation. Will we fire? Can she inflict significant damage on us before we do? That's her to judge, not ours. Tisk, tisk, tisk. What a fun game. The Romantica fired. The first shell impacted the sea over 100 meters to Valkyrie's port side. Valkyrie completed her turn, her bow widening as it veered. The second shell landed with remarkable accuracy, less than 30 meters from the bow. The aftermath of the explosion sent waves crashing against the Valkyrie's hull. The Valkyrie cut through the waves steadily and heavily, its angle and speed unchanged. Then came the third and fourth shots. Instead of converging as the Valkyrie approached, the impact became more scattered. The fifth and sixth shots, not only were the impacts scattered, but even the saturation rhythm began to lose its rhythm. The seventh shot was delayed. The Valkyrie pressed within 250 meters of the Romantica. The Romantica suddenly hoisted sail and fled clumsily, panic-stricken, and humiliated. The Romantica has broken saturation, the path is clear, the lookout shouted excitedly. The Rice, close, boom. As if to save face, the Rice suddenly turned in the direction of the Valkyrie's advance, but before she could straighten her hull, a cannon exploded from the starboard side. The accuracy of the shot was not very high, impacting just outside the Rice, 80 meters from her, but only 50 meters from the vortex escape, which had not yet started speed. The Rice immediately twisted and turned away, and even the vortex escape hurriedly turned the rudder, making the shell a great success. Lorraine kicked the protruding cabled rafters on the deck boredly and sighed eccentrically. Each generation is worse than the previous one. When we were sailing the Golden Hind, they were much braver than now. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 466 Long Time No See. Bang! A lead bullet pierced through a gap in the shield and struck an axe-wielding pirate squarely in the chest. The pirate screamed and fell, only to be caught before he even hit the ground by the man behind him. He took the axe from him, and with two puh-puh sounds, he swung it down. Tisk! The sharp axe blade slammed into the planking below. The pirate twisted his wrist a few times, raised the axe again, swung it high, and slashed down. After several such repetitions, a small crack finally appeared in the thick planking. Something fell inside, and the echoing sound brought joy to the pirates' faces. "Captain, it's through," the axe-wielding pirate shouted from within the shield wall. Bonnet glanced across the chaotic battle on the deck, nodded, and said, "Go below." Before he could finish his words, Julius crouched down and pulled open the hatch. First, 4 shield-bearing pirates entered, followed by the attackers wielding axes and swords, and finally Julius. Once he entered, Bonnet, escorted by 4 more shield-bearing pirates, slipped through the hatch. This was the lower hatch near the forecastle, located between the foremast and mainmast, about a third of the way down the hull. The hatch led to the lower gun bay, its planks completely recessed into the deck, measuring about 2 meters long and wide. The staircase leading up and down was also roughly that width. While 2 meters wasn't exactly spacious, it was far superior to the maze of winding, cramped corridors in the forecastle. It was a direct connection, making it easy to get in and out. Normally, sailors preferred this hatch and the corresponding aft hatch to enter and exit the gun bay, and then from there to the lower hold. In times of war, pirates also preferred this hatch. The invading pirates were stopped near the staircase by Drake's gunners, who were on high alert. Lorraine was wealthy, and since the flagship's era of full firearms, he had been committed to bringing the entire direct fleet into the era of firearms. Shooting with long and short rifles was a compulsory subject for every sailor in the direct fleet. The standard for the general crew was 60 rings on a 15-meter target, while the stormtroopers required 75 rings on a 15-meter target, and the musketeers 80 rings on a 30-meter target. Therefore, the sailors who managed to gain a foothold in the direct fleet were generally good shooters, especially in the densely populated gun bays. 100 or so men formed a dense human barrier in front of the lower hold hatches. Under the command of the gunner, divided into 5 groups, they took turns to form a single, almost man-eating wall. 4 pirates who descended to the gun bays fell immediately upon contact, leaving the remaining men trapped behind their small shield wall, unable to advance or retreat. The bang, 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 bang of gunfire rained down relentlessly. Julius's face flushed crimson. Crouching on the stairs, 2 muskets in hand, he could only poke his muscles back in barely noticeable moments of firing. But his accuracy was alarmingly high. The gun bay was tiny, with a roof and a base, flanked by ammunition crates and cannons mounted on carriages. The tightly packed lines of gunners left no room for hiding. Even with a musket's effective range of only 8 meters, a stray bullet would still hide a person unless it flew above them. A stalemate, a stalemate. 2 shields were shattered, and 6 pirates were knocked down. The shieldmen protecting Bonnet couldn't get in, so they resorted to passing their shields around, filling the gaps in the shield wall. Bonnet waited impatiently at the top of the stairs, sending equally exhausted pirates to the main deck to fetch more men. He listened to the crackling of gunfire, and unexpectedly recognized the sound of capital chewing on human flesh. Who knew how much Lorraine had spent arming these sailors? He only knew that a new British-made maritime commuter rifle cost between £80 and £100 on the black market, and a Dublin musket sold for £30 to £40. Comparing these prices, his pirate group, the most powerful pirate force in the Windward Islands, earned less than £33 in dividends last year. Even veteran officers like Julius and Studgren only earned a little over £150. A veteran officer's annual income equaled the armament of an average Drake sailor. And judging by their thorough training, these rifles weren't treated as precious at all. Every sailor had received thorough marksmanship training. In other words, Lorraine scrapped a large number of firearms every year just for training. Damn capitalists. Damn privateers. The second batch of reinforcements arrived, numbering only a dozen or so. Bonnet didn't want to send more men, but the small staircase simply couldn't accommodate them. Bonnet's only comfort was that 5 of the newcomers had guns. Adding Julius's original 4, minus the 2 killed when the shield wall collapsed, There were 7 men capable of returning fire, increasing the intensity of his firepower. Regrouping, the exchange of fire continued. 10 minutes later, the 7th pirate shield shattered, and a 4th wave of reinforcements arrived. The enemy's pressure finally broke due to widespread overheating of their gun barrels. Julius seized the opportunity and ordered the heavily wounded pirates to charge. The frustrated and frantic Vikings howled and charged, diving into the thick smoke and fog that made it impossible to see their opponents. But the other side was empty. Aside from blood on the ground and 7 or 8 still warm bodies, there was nothing beyond them, no people, no guns. The hatch leading to the lower hold was tightly closed. Julius tried to pull it, but it creaked, it didn't latch. He stood outside, hesitating. Bonnet walked over with a frown, taking in the blood and the few bodies on the floor, then the dark, gaping hatch. They actually abandoned this place. Julius lowered the hatch. Perhaps their guns are overheating, and they're afraid to engage us in close combat. 100 or so men are afraid to engage over 40 of us in close combat? You're underestimating Lorraine Arthur's men. Bonnet shook his head. Is there an ambush down there? 100 on deck, 100 in the gun bay, and at least 50 guarding the poop. By the standards of a Tier 5 ship, they shouldn't have any sailors, Julius guessed. It's possible they've made temporary reinforcements for the purpose of boarding. Lorraine did this in the Cantabrians, so it's not uncommon. Sailors who were added temporarily aren't so obedient. Julius recalled the pile of pirate corpses at the stairwell and the young but brave resistance on the deck. Captain, how about I take the men down to investigate? Be careful, Bonnet said solemnly. If you find anything amiss, withdraw. Lorraine's ship is fine, but we don't have many of our old brothers left. Julius grinned. I know. After discussing and deciding, Julius selected 8 men to follow him downstairs, 4 with swords and shields, and 4 with pistols. This made Julius truly grateful for Odin's honor. In this era, the simple sword and shield attire was almost unique to the few remaining Vikings. If it weren't for their pirate group's strong Viking ancestry, no other pirate group would have found so many skilled shield-wielding, loyal, and brave pirate warriors. Without these sword and shield pirates, the storm of lead bullets would have torn them apart long ago. Flesh and blood could never have survived in such a state. Julius couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. Perhaps there wasn't a trap at all. Perhaps the Drake sailors had truly escaped. Perhaps the Viking pirates were the Drake merchants' natural nemesis, but because they hadn't engaged in direct combat, neither side had noticed this fact. If that were the case, that would be wonderful. The first sword and shield pirate descended the stairs, shield raised, followed by the second, the third. The 4 formed a small shield wall, Julius at the rear, and then the other 4 musketeers. The lower hold was dark. A narrow aisle ran down the middle, flanked by rows of watertight cargo holds. There seemed to be people in the middle of the aisle, densely packed, but the expected sound of gunfire was absent. Julius squinted through the gaps in the shield wall. Across the crowd, the leader stood up, his towering figure stepping towards the pirate shield wall. Hiss. The sharp blade rubbed against a copper ring on the edge of the sharkskin scabbard, and sparks flowed to the ground. The man held the sword in one hand and the oversized round shield in the other hand. The shield was several times larger than normal, and it looked light as a feather. He moved forward slowly and steadily, and his figure and face became clearer and clearer as the distance got closer. Julius' pupils shrank. Grand Commander, long time no see. Julius, Leif lowered his sword and said lightly, are you the one chosen by Bonnet to die? Chapter 467 Just kill you. Ooh la la la. With a resounding thud, accompanied by shattering bones, howls, and screams, Sturgren's yoke swept across the sailor's raised sword, cleaving it in 2. The swordsman flew backward, spitting blood. The musketeers on the poop brought their rifles forward, but before they could take aim, they saw several pirates with round shields advancing and surrounding Sturgren with their shields. Desperate, some sailors fired a few shots at the shield wall, but as before, the lead bullets, capable of piercing thin iron, were no match for the Viking-style leather shields covered in thick composite fur. The bullets embedded themselves in the fluffy fur, leaving only a puff and then disappearing. Sturgren expressed his relief with a long, contented cry to the heavens. He realized that the pirates' high proportion of shieldmen on the defensive side successfully neutralized the Drake's all-firearms force's formidable mid-range lethality. Boarding engagements left no room for long-range combat, and at close range, the Drakes were no match for the pirates. Bonnet and Julius likely enjoyed this unexpected advantage. The gun bays were narrower and closer than the main deck. If their muskets were ineffective, those poor sailors wouldn't even know where to escape. He swung his shackles violently. Come closer. Let's go, Captain. Captain Stedron, an unarmed pirate, rushed from the bow, his face pale and breathless. Captain, the captain wants you to gather 10 more men and equip them with more shields. I'm going to take them to the gun bay. More shields. Pirates boarding a ship are all out, especially in situations like this where they should be going all out. Except for the minimum number of men left to man the ship, the rest of the force will join the boarding. Bonnet had only taken 20 men with him, leaving the Ericsson with over 30 manning the ship, and a dozen guns to suppress the musketeers on Alvet's poop. Counting the 20 or so men struck down or cut down, Stedron still had 150 or 60 men under his command, commanding a complete advantage in both numbers and combat power across the main deck. He simply couldn't understand why Bonnet had only taken 20 men downstairs, because the gun bays weren't manpower efficient. Why would they need more men so soon? And more shields? Could it be that Drake's new ships were slender on the outside, but actually quite spacious? Stedron pulled at his hair in frustration. He wasn't the type of intelligent individual prone to independent thought. Back then, even the unintelligent Leif would mock him for being all brawn and no brains, a testament to his straightforwardness. But this time, he was, after all, the deck's boarding commander. The captain's orders must be carried out, and the deeper meaning behind them must also be understood. Captain, the pale-faced pirate urged anxiously, the captain wants you to gather your men immediately, huh? Oh. Then, someone, take 10 men, a few extra swords and shields, and go down to the gun bay to help the captain. The pirates who were called out immediately followed the pale-faced pirate. There was no need to deliberately gather men. The entire deck was filled with pirates anyway, and at least a third of them were equipped with shields. They could easily gather a mere 10 men before going down to the deck. Stedron quickly abandoned his interrupted thoughts, completely forgetting Bonnet's plan to withdraw men. He raised a yoke and swung it violently. Come closer, take the poop, and kill. The pirates near the mainmast pushed back their enemies and swarmed towards Stedron. Soon, over 50 men had gathered and, led by Stedron, they launched an assault on the mess hall hatch held by Captain Frayne. The attack was unstoppable. The pirates, braving the sparse lead bullets from the poop deck, only suffered 3 casualties before engaging Frayne's organized defenses outside the mess hall hatch. Drake's defense of this crucial position was far more organized than on deck. With musketeers overhead and reinforcements from the poop behind, the wounded were carried to the hold and quickly replaced. While their individual strength remained inferior to that of the pirates aboard the Ericsson, they at least maintained a measured advance and retreat, less prone to collapse than before. The pirates' attack stalled there. Seeing his men unable to break through, Sturgling waved his hand to part the crowd, his eyes fixed on Captain Frayne, who was distractedly directing his actions among the sailors. As long as I can finish you off, Sturgling gathered his strength, stretched his legs, and was about to charge. Captain Sturgling, the pale-faced pirate appeared again, still pale, still panting, and still alone. Sturgling, having nearly leaped to his feet, narrowly avoided falling. He turned back in exasperation. Why you again? Lion Bay found this question difficult to answer. Captain, the captain wants you to organize 20 men. At least half of them should be shieldmen. For the rest, the more guns the better. I'll take them away immediately. Only 2 minutes, another 20. Stedron was puzzled. And what do you mean by the more guns the better? Lion Bay gestured with a shooting motion. Guns, muskets, long or short, whether they're already there or just found. The captain needs them. Well, someone, bring some help immediately. A third of the pirates who were attacking the poop were quickly taken away. Short on shields and outnumbered, Stedron quickly felt the resilience of the Drake sailors. He was forced to lead the pirates back to the mainmast. Fortunately, the battle on the main deck had become concentrated. The Drakes had abandoned the forecastle, and the pirates had no intention of attacking there. The two sides were divided by the mainmast, 110 to 70. Stedron concentrated his forces, and the pirates still held the absolute initiative. A second assault on the poop. The battle, just a dozen meters away, was even more intense than before. Stedron led the charge, knocking over 2 young sailors with a single lash, and once again aimed at Captain Frayne. Just to finish you off, Captain Stedron. Stedron barely managed to control himself, following his instincts and delivering a powerful blow to the pale-faced man's forehead. "Tell me, Captain, how many men do you want this time? 20, or 20 more?" His pale face trembled twice, and sweat streamed down his face, but it wasn't because he was scared by Stedron. "More shields, more rifles, I want them all immediately." "Shields again?" Stedron was furious. "We need shields on deck too. If the captain takes all the shields, how can we fight the musketeers on the poop?" "Captain," his pale lips trembled slightly. "We've suffered heavy casualties. Over a dozen shields have been shattered. Up there you only have to face about 30 muskets, and we have the gunners on board to help contain them, but down below, we're facing over 100 muskets. We don't even have anywhere to hide. If we want to take the hold, we have to go that way." "Captain," Stedron didn't hear the rest of the sentence clearly. From the moment he heard the phrase "over 10 shields were shattered," he realized the situation seemed different from what he expected. A fifth-tier ship had over 250 sailors, and Drake was equipped with over 250 muskets. A melee defense of 30 to 50 men would effectively slow the pirate attack. If the remaining 200 guns were simultaneously turned. Stedron shuddered. Even if he wasn't particularly bright, he knew his fate. The Viking leather shields supposedly meant to counter Drake's firearms were no match for such a swift torrent of light bullets. Had the captain been silently bearing this immense pressure? "Hey, everyone! Request 30 men, immediately support the captain." Quickly, the third wave of reinforcements had departed. The pirates on the main deck had been weakened again, their numbers now roughly equal to those of the Drake's sailors. However, the Drakes on the main deck had to be divided between Katarina's musketry and Freen's melee units. In a direct confrontation, Stedron remained the formidable force. Moreover, this time, in addition to his bravery, he felt a surge of urgency. Infinite strength surged from deep within his muscles. Stedron raised the shackles with both hands, gritted his teeth, and for the third time, he ensnared the unsuspecting Freen. "As long as I can finish you. Oh la la la." Chapter 468 Red Hair. Send the wounded up the stairway and place them in the tactics room, left stairway, hold firm. We're boarding now. Fearing death will not only get you killed, but also your classmates and colleagues. No escape. No retreat. Remember what you were taught in school, form a formation, support each other, and refuse to yield an inch. Freen clutched the railing in front of him and breathed heavily. His command post was in front of the tactics room, on the second floor of the aft deck. It had originally been Admiral Katarina's command post. After the boarding began, the foredeck was abandoned due to tactics. Katarina voluntarily vacated this post and moved her command team to the upper deck of the aft deck to command the musketeers and oversee the entire formation. This became Freen's command post. In the Grand Fleet, the captain of a command ship was never an enviable position. The fleet's command system will long overshadow the ship's command system, much like an army operation in which a theater commander places his headquarters on the hilltop where the enemy commander resides. Since both sides see and hear the same things, the theater commander can easily sideline the enemy commander. How should these two sides coordinate their relationship? Land offers vast expanses, and the command centers of theater, frontline, division, regiment, and company levels are often separated by distances ranging from 30 kilometers to 1 kilometer. Another advantage of having a high-level command system remote from the front lines is that commanders can direct the war as theoretically as possible, unaffected by derogatory terms like emotion, empathy, impulsiveness, and passion. However, aboard a ship, there's certainly no such ample space. Being on the same ship, a commander's only recourse is self-discipline. Catalina excelled in this regard. Whether in the previous naval battle or during the current boarding, she ensured she didn't interfere with Captain Freen's command. Even if she expected anything of Alvet, she would convey her orders directly to the captain, and whether the captain followed through or not, she would not interfere. For this reason alone, Freen gave the two sides a perfect score for their cooperation today. Indeed, for this reason alone. Following the embarrassing naval battle, the Alvet faced an equally embarrassing boarding battle. Freen knew his crew had done their best. These young men were brave and fearless, demonstrating mutual assistance and camaraderie. But they were still losing ground. Losing their port side in a single encounter made it easy for the enemy to board. This overly smooth boarding allowed the enemy to deploy a large number of men on deck, launching a massive attack that quickly secured control of all exterior spaces except the poop. Fortunately, There were the musketeers on the poop. This elite force, half veterans and half newcomers, cherished by Freen, always provided timely cover. Though their infamous leather shields prevented them from inflicting significant casualties, they were able to rescue injured crew members at crucial moments, allowing Freen to orchestrate effective rescue operations, saving at least 40 lives. With so many casualties and so few deaths, Freen's forces were increasingly stretched thin. He sent his first mate to Katarina, hoping to mobilize the ship's hidden forces, not under the captain's command, and to divert the ample manpower from the gun base to reinforce the upper deck. But, "You can discuss this with Captain Erickson yourself," were the exact words Katarina had sent back. Freen's teeth ached with rage. Rigid, stubborn, and devoid of empathy? How could the once passionate first mate, only 2 years away from the flagship, have become this way? Freen took 2 deep breaths, straightened his back, and tightened his grip on the hilt of his sword. "Take command for me. I'm going to talk to Admiral Dippo." Ooh la la la. A sudden, dry thunderclap crackled in the clear sky. Freen turned in shock, stunned, watching the pirate's fierce commander leap from the crowd. He leaped so high, his pupils gleaming a faint, almost unrecognizable red, as he leaped from the throng. His position was over 5 meters from the poop, and the main deck was 3 meters lower than Freen's command post, but none of that could stop him. He leaped, his massive, bear-like figure soaring into the air, his formidable yoke raised. He slammed his foot into the shield held up by the pirate's shield-bearer, then crushed the neck of an unfortunate sailor. Then, leaping 4 or 5 meters into the air, he struck down on Freen with a force incomprehensible to humans. Freen felt as if he had witnessed such inhuman strength before. It didn't resemble Lorraine's elegant, sharp fighting style, nor Hannah's shadowy, shifting style, nor the might of Blackbeard's crew. It was something like, "Captain, be careful." Freen was shoved hard, startling him awake. In the instant he fell, he caught sight of the young, loyal first mate's face. Puff. The yoke slammed down hard on the first mate's head, shattering his skull and splattering his brains. The first mate's head was smashed into his chest. Thick blood gushed out like a fountain, splashing across the walls and the ground like a torrential rain, coating Freen's head and face. Sturgling landed on the ground, and with one hand, he lifted the lifeless first mate into the crowd below. He lifted the yoke, staring blankly at Freen. "As long as I can finish you off." Ooh la la la. The heavy yoke needed no prepositioning. Freen had no time to rise, no time to dodge, no time to even grieve over the first mate's death before it came crashing down on his head. Ah, clang. Ling. Dark clouds suddenly rose. Freen's shrill screams abruptly ceased. Opening his eyes, he saw only a wisp of fiery red hair fluttering before him. At the crucial moment, Katarina descended from the sky, crouching low. With her left dagger, she secured the shackle's chain. With her right rapier, curling her palm in a flower pattern, she thrust it towards Sturgren's heart with a swish. Sturgren stepped back, dodging the thrust and landing to counterattack. But Katarina was even more agile. Even as she pushed her opponent back, the female knight pressed forward. Her elegant, distinctive left hand precisely secured the chain's chain, where she was least able to exert force. Her right sword, dragged behind her, swung upwards and slashed across Sturgren's thigh, leaving a long gash. Sturgren could only retreat again, retreating, spinning. Blood streamed from the wound on his thigh, staining his linen trousers red. The shackle, shaking upright, slashed with the force of thunder. Katarina retreated violently. Her long legs took alternating long strides backward, giving up the space she had gained without hesitation. And retreated back to Captain Freen in just a few steps. Boom. Freen was exhausted from escaping death. "Admiral. Admiral, Captain Freen." Catalina hunched her back like a leopard, her arms tensed. "Please go up there and continue commanding, including the musketeers and the skew and sea parrot on the sea. The sea parrot is damaged. The tactics of the 2 ships should focus on self-preservation, not killing. But we still hope to delay the enemy as much as possible and prevent them from sending reinforcements." "Yes, yes." Freen quickly ran up the stairs, leaving only Catalina and Sturgren in the second-floor corridor. Mist emanated from Sturgren's nostrils, red-haired. "Katarina, I heard from the captain that you almost became the first loser in the fight for the Pirate King, but the one who died in the end was Black Mamba." Katarina slowly changed her posture, raising her left hand high, holding the dagger in the air, and stretching her right hand forward with the tip of the sword tilted up. "Are you also a berserker?" "You know berserker, No, Katarina quickly denied her guess and ignored Stedron's question. Berserkers don't have such clear thinking, and if you really are a berserker, I can't withstand your attack at all. Stedron's face darkened. You are provoking me, woman, as long as you are not that kind of fully awakened monster. Katarina snorted. What can you do if I provoke you? Chapter 469, The Power of Mad Battle. The Waters of Bastere. This battle was arguably the fourth full-scale clash of the core forces of Blackbeard and Lorraine since they declared war as pirate kings in 1780. The previous three clashes all ended in draws, but regardless of who prevailed, the battles between Lorraine and Blackbeard, and between the Queen Anne's Revenge and the Golden Hind, were undoubtedly the undisputed protagonists of the battlefield. Only this time was different. The Battle of Bastere marked the Valkyrie's Caribbean debut. The once mighty Queen Anne's Revenge no longer held absolute superiority in terms of individual ship power, and the initiative on the battlefield, along with its title as the Caribbean's most powerful ship, passed to Lorraine. As a result, the battle ultimately devolved into a classic Lorraine-style naval engagement, a rarity in recent years. Scattered, fragmented, and chaotic, the already narrow battlefield was artificially divided into 5 sections, each centered around Drake Maritime Group's pioneering special-shaped Galen, the Valkyrie, Alvet, Brunhild, Jilshakorgal, and Grey. The 5 major armies appear independent, but in reality, whichever one emerges victorious first will irreversibly tip the scales of the war. Lorraine's initial prediction was, of course, the Valkyrie. Despite facing Blackbeard's 7 most elite and powerful ships alone, Lorraine never doubted for a second that the Valkyrie would ultimately triumph. The initial battle unfolded as he anticipated. The Lone Wanderer sank, the Golden Shackles crippled, and the Valkyrie delivered a stunning blow to Blackbeard's heart. The vast disparity in power repeatedly shattered Blackbeard's meager perspective. However, the battlefield is the world's most poignant mirror. Blackbeard's pirates, cornered, refused to simply call it quits in despair. In desperation, they displayed a chilling pride and arrogance. The Queen Anne's Revenge sacrificed itself as bait. The vortex escape, which had been active throughout the battle, suddenly appeared directly in front of the Valkyrie and, with a classic rear-end attack, nearly brought Lorraine to a dead end. Lorraine narrowly escaped, but the Valkyries, and indeed all super-fast warships of that era's center of gravity design flaws were clearly exposed in that evasive maneuver. As a result, high speeds were prohibited, sharp turns were prohibited, and broadsides were disabled. Even though the Valkyrie appeared unscathed, and even though Lorraine and his crew remained absolutely confident in their chapter's ultimate victory, everyone familiar with the situation knew that the Valkyrie, barely able to maintain its maneuverability, had lost any chance of a swift decisive victory. In other words, from that moment on, the spotlight on the battlefield officially shifted to the main chapter. The pirates, led by the Vikings Vonnet and the Eriksson, launched the initial assault, while the Drakes, led by the red-haired Vice Admiral Katarina and the Alvet, held their ground, awaiting reinforcements. Their outcome would determine the final outcome of the Battle of Bastere. Oh la la la, Stedron's massive figure blocked the entire aisle. He moved with such force that the thick shackles whirred through the air as he aimed a powerful blow at Katarina's delicate face. Undaunted, Katarina charged forward, her right sword slanting upward, clanging through the shackles' bent chains. The collisions had a strange rhythm. Sometimes light, sometimes heavy, steady and intense. The shackles' end gave way midway. Katarina used her left short sword to steady her attack, then slashed through the chains, slashing straight at Stedron's right hand, where he held the shackle. Stedron was forced to retreat, but Katarina, having forced her opponent back, immediately pursued him, raising the trembling tip of her sword and piercing Stedron's heart. Stedron retreated again, taking a step out of Katarina's range, and before he could even regain his balance, he swung the shackles. Katarina deftly dodged. Sturgren's strike missed, and the yoke slammed heavily onto the ship's deck in the aisle. With a resounding thud, it actually carved sharp, fine cracks into the solid oak planks. This was the power of the berserker. As a war machine favored by the old faith, even for a human like Sturgren, unable to achieve full awakening, his strength far exceeded the normal definition of powerful. Sturgren straightened his back, his nearly 2-meter height towering like a titan from Viking legend. The battlefield is a man's world, red hair, even if you were mistakenly placed on the same level as the captain by those parasites in the Brotherhood, a woman is still a woman. She may give birth to brave warriors, but she herself can never be a qualified warrior. I will smear your brains on the deck." Sturglin swung the yoke and smashed a dent in the outer wall of the tactical room with a loud bang. "I will let you know that once a woman desecrates the sacred battlefield, even Valhalla will not open its doors to you." How ridiculous. You barbarians discriminate against women, but at the same time you expect Valkyries to lead you to Valhalla. What's more, the Vikings' Valhalla fell long ago under the glory of God. Katarina rubbed her sore arms and resumed her fighting stance. Humility, honesty, mercy, bravery, justice, sacrifice, honor, soul. Her expression was as solemn and unified as a mass. "My ancestors, with their devotion to the Lord, have triumphed over you, extinguished your faith, and slain your great king. If there's one, there's another." She sank down, leaning forward, shifting her center of gravity. "The Lord will not let me die easily before I have atoned for my sins. Victory, only. Me." Katarina launched herself into action, sprinting across the 3-meter gap in the blink of an eye, the tip of her sword thrusting straight for Sturgrin's throat. Sturgrin's eyes flashed a blood red. He turned his head, sidled sideways, and unhesitatingly retracted the shackles at his side. Even though the movement was ill-suited to exerting force, the shackles still moved with a force of thunder. Sturgrin was faster. At this rate, before Katarina's sword could pierce Sturgrin's throat, the shackle would strike her shoulder, tearing flesh and shattering bone. It would appear a mutually assured loss, but in reality, only Katarina would be the loser. Fortunately, Katarina never underestimated her opponent, nor did she imagine she could defeat the berserker with a single surprise attack. She abandoned her thrusts and, trapped within Sturgrin's embrace, twisted her waist and legs like a dance, suddenly rising. As she rose, her raised left hand pressed against Sturgrin's right arm. The broad guard of her left sword caught the chain, and the serrated blade clicked, locking with the chain. Sturgrin's shackles were locked, but Katarina's sword remained free. She spun a second time, like a dancer taking her partner's hand in a waltz, guiding him into an embrace, her right hand reaching out to touch his cheek, facing away from her partner. What a beautiful dance, beautiful yet filled with murderous intent. Sturgrin's hair stood on end. In his peripheral vision, the gleaming blade edged ever closer, as if it would slice his throat and sever his veins in an instant. His mind went blank, and blood filled his entire field of vision without him realizing it. "Damn, woman," Sturgrin awakened. Between life and death, this fierce Viking suddenly broke free from the shackles that had eluded him for years. Infinite power surged from deep within his muscles, sweeping Katarina away like a tidal wave. Katarina was completely unprepared. She flew sideways, crashing through the aisle railing, spitting blood as she fell toward the battlefield below, where the two sides were locked in a stalemate. The captain of the Helvet, commanding his sailors against the enemy, was terrified and cried out, "Open the line! Charge!" Boom! Before the words had even finished, Katarina had already crashed down, scattering a whole group and sending 2 pirates and a sailor careening off like a relay. Some quick-witted pirates tried to rush up to finish off the attack, but the captain of the assault force was even quicker, securing Katarina behind him with 2 lightly wounded backup soldiers before anyone could react. "Open the line, protect the admiral, kill! Kill the redhead! Kill!" The battle on the deck escalated to a climax with Katarina's sudden fall. Pirates and sailors engaged in a desperate fight. Captain Frayne, atop the poop, directed all available muskets toward Katarina. Katarina lay motionless. No one dared to check on her. Although her fall suggested she had done her best to protect herself in midair, what if? Cough, cough, cough. She shuddered slightly, then began to cough, her coughs growing heavier. After coughing a dozen times, she opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of thick blood before finally regaining her breath. "Admiral, are you okay?" Sifan, who was maneuvering on the main deck with a stormtrooper, carefully helped Katarina to her feet. Katarina wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth with difficulty. "Not dead, probably." She strained her back to straighten herself up and saw Sturgrin standing blankly at the broken railing, his eyes empty and unfocused. He spotted her in the crowd, and their gazes met. Sturgrin's eyes blazed blood red, and with a howl, he lunged at Katarina. "That's why I hate men." Scatter, boom. People and horses toppled over. Chapter 470. Is this a backup plan? It's a mess here and there, it's a mess everywhere. Sure enough, the vice admiral is not as reliable as the admiral. He was thrown into chaos by a small cadre under a mere pirate. The key is that it's in such a mess. What support can I provide? I must complain. but complaining to my superiors will give people the impression of being unruly, and I might be exiled to Africa. What should I do? What should I do? What should I do? Captain Freen pulled his hair in despair. The musketeers fire freely and do their best to cover those scattered sailors. The musketeers on the upper deck stared at the crosshairs of their guns. Yes, and the skua. How are the skua and the sea parrot doing? Still surrounded, Captain, Catalina's staff answered loudly. Although you asked them to return to support, the skua's fore and aft sails and mizzen sails caught fire, and its speed and flexibility were greatly affected. In a 2 versus 4 situation, it is already her limit to be able to expose herself under the cover of the sea parrot. She wants to break out of the siege. I know this is asking too much. Frayne glanced at the staff officer unhappily, but don't forget, in order to deal with the possibility of the Alvet being boarded by a superior enemy, the main fleet added a full 70 of the best stormtroopers. There were only 30 on the Alvet, and the other 40 were all on the Puffin and skua. The battle has come to this point. If we don't force them to return to support now, do we have to wait until Alvet lowers the flag and then force them to kidnap our vice admiral? The staff officer was stunned for a while, but the opinions left by the admiral before joining the battle. The admiral is being trampled all over the deck by the barbarians below. I am the current commander of the main fleet, and my command authority is authorized by the admiral. Yes. Ask them to return to support Alvet at all costs. Do you think it's okay? Frayne shook his head decisively. No, it is to order them to make a gesture of returning to support at all costs. Once the pirates take the bait, they will try to annihilate as many enemy forces as possible. In other words, their mission is still pruning, and ours is still bait. We've just added an excuse to return for reinforcements. Do you understand? Oh, I understand a little bit, right? Avoid the berserkers, maintain a firm defense line. Don't let those pirates reach the poop. The mess hall and stairway are the last resort. We must not yield an inch. The berserkers are coming. Disperse, boom. Powered by the purest faith in their souls, the berserkers have been one of the top forces on the battlefield since their inception. Through deep self-hypnosis, they possess superhuman strength and speed. Unfazed by pain, fatigue, or fear, they can fight to the very moment of their death. Their ability is called theosophy, and in this era, it is one of the 3 great wisdoms of the universe. Theosophy is a complex, if complex, subject, difficult to generalize, and its manifestations are diverse. But ultimately, everything is rooted in faith. Faith is the foundation of divine favor, and only those who possess divine favor can become so-called theosophers. From this perspective, Lorraine's superhuman strength, endurance, cold resistance, resilience, natural double eyelids, and intermittent effectiveness, along with his wind-calling technique, which has barely helped him at all fall under the category of trance. Noah's divination and fate-controlling techniques, as well as Mohu's inexplicable mastery of fear, also fall largely into the category of trance. Even Atron's hormone cannon bears a faint resemblance to trance. Of course, the most widespread trance-mongering techniques are those who call themselves Vikings, berserkers. Berserkers are powerful. Back when Drake was a rookie, Lorraine suffered terribly at the hands of Leif, receiving the most serious injury of his life. Ultimately, he managed to eke out a victory with the help of winds and seawater. But berserkers are also weak. Excessive deep hypnosis has robbed them of basic judgment and the ability to sense danger. They are not invulnerable. Cumulative damage can still kill them. The only challenge for those who oppose them is how to inflict damage upon them. Unfortunately, Katarina had no solution to this problem. Run, close in. As the daughter of a noble, educated in the orthodox chivalry of childhood, Katarina's combat prowess far surpassed that of ordinary warriors. Even among Lorraine's core team, her overall strength, superior to both Noah and Pierce, firmly placed her in 4th place, behind Wang Yi. But these illusions were useless against the awakened bloodline of Sturgrun. No matter how Katarina devised an approach, no matter how ingenious her movements or coordinated her tactics, the delirious Sturgrun simply swung his shackles and drove them all away. He rampaged across the deck like a stampeding boar or a galloping rhino, and his attacks weren't limited to Katarina. It seemed he was employing a principle of threat first, then proximity. Proximity meant the closer the person, the greater the risk, while threat first meant that aiming a gun at him in the crowd would not only kill himself, but also innocent enemies and colleagues nearby. In short, the berserker Sturgrun single-handedly drove the tide of the battle on the Alvet, preventing those who sought to escape from fleeing and those who sought to pursue from catching up. The 3 key points on the poop deck, including the mess hall door leading to the lower deck, were shattered by Studgren's flails, shattering the thick defenses. The pirates seized the opportunity to charge into the hold and attack the lower deck, where the wounded and prisoners were housed. The situation on the left and right stairways was only slightly better than that on the mess hall, especially the left stairway. The staircase leading from the first floor to the second floor had collapsed, forcing the remaining sailors to flee to the second floor and establish a new defense between the second and third platforms. Both offensive and defensive efforts significantly reduced the density of the decks. Drake was left with only 12 scattered men, forming small groups of 3 or 4 in various corners of the deck to fight off the enemy. The pirates were reduced to just over 30 men. A small group was assigned to clear the remaining sailors from the deck, while the majority focused their attack on the starboard stairway on the poop deck. The poop was suddenly surrounded on 3 sides, while the deck finally cleared a bit, allowing Sturgren to halt his aimless pursuit. Katerina, 2 muskets dangling from her shoulders, suppressed a murderous intent within her. Sturgren stood dumbly less than 10 meters away, unmarked by any pirates bearing shields or other weapons, his eyes blank and unfocused. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and Katerina knew she had to seize it. Slowly raising her rifle, catching her breath, she aimed both hands and eyes at Sturgren's forehead. This way of saying goodbye may not be fair to you, but I'm the admiral, so, die. A crisp snap interrupted Katerina's prayer. Just as the outcome of the battle on deck was about to be decided, the gun hatch on the center line of the mizzenmast was suddenly opened from the inside. The gunnery commander, led by 80 or 90 fully armed gunners, rushed out in a stream, instantly attracting everyone's attention. The atmosphere on the ship suddenly took on a strange tone. The gunnery commander was keenly aware of the source of this strange situation. It was clearly a life-and-death confrontation between 2 rivals, but the pirates and sailors seemed to be rejecting his presence. Shouldn't they be surprised to receive such a large-scale support suddenly? The gunnery commander was completely bewildered and could only look to Catalina for help. Admiral Dippo, Adorned has fulfilled his mission and is coming to support as planned. He took a breath and lowered his voice to ask, what's going on here? It's hard to explain it to you in just a few words. Catalina lowered her gun helplessly. Anyway, be careful, the berserker is coming. Chapter 471 Brothers Reunited. Woo. 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 A strange, deep sound emanated from the hatchway below, loud yet muffled. It began abruptly, reverberating endlessly within the thick hull, echoing one after another, a deafening ringing in the ears. Bonnet vaguely heard other sounds filling the gaps between the sounds, but the din was too overwhelming for him to distinguish. He grew impatient, crouching down and trying to thrust his head forward, facing the source. This, in turn, brought his ears into focus. It seemed to be a trumpet. It must have been a thin, straight ram's horn, a small trumpet favored by the Norwegians for its resonant sound and portability. With a few special carvings, it could become a perfect charge. But why was the Norwegian trumpet echoing across the Caribbean? Bonnet felt as if he should know the answer, but his restlessness prevented him from calmly searching for the answer. A voice within him, rising and falling with the trumpet's blast, whispered to him that the goat was important, the cacophony of noise that filled the blast was important, the sudden disappearance of the musketeers was important, Julius's discovery was important. Wait? Julius? Bonnet leaped to his feet, prepare for battle. The one ambushed in the lower hold is, whoosh! A white shadow shot out from the lower hold, brushing past Bonnet's body before crashing into the dome of the gun bay. This time Bonnet could clearly discern the sound of a pumpkin shattering, and something sticky, oily or pasty, splattered down, splattering all over his head and face. He heard the pirates behind him scream, "It's blood! It seems to be falling from the sky." And brains, by tear, what just flew out. Noble Siegfried leaned over to drink from the spring, and Hagen stabbed the cross on his back. A hymn began, a loud, raspy voice drowning out the trumpet, and the trumpet's blast suddenly grew muffled. A loud, raspy voice interrupted, and the pirates fell silent. Heart's blood splattered all over Hagen. He has committed such crimes in the name of a warrior. No one in history or today has ever done so. Someone was singing. A mournful elegy replaced the desolate war cry, and heavy footsteps combined to create a third note. He plunged the tip of his spear deep into his heart, then fled in utter terror. The horn's call grew more urgent, stirring the heartbeat, stirring the soul's breath. The pirates felt their breath coming hard, as if their souls were being drawn into poetry. The world of poetry was filled with only sorrow and trembling, and no one could tell whether they wanted to be tragic or despicable. Realizing he was wounded, Siegfried leaped from the spring, raging. He reached for his carved bow or sword. If he did, Hagen's sin would be avenged. But the dying warrior couldn't find his sword, and only his shield remained by his side. So he seized his shield and rushed toward Hagen, leaving King Gongte's courtiers no time to flee. The hymn stopped here. The cadence of the footsteps became the sole accompaniment to the trumpet blast, soon joined by panting, wailing, the creaking of wood, and the hissing of swords across patinated wood. It was as if, no, someone was actually emerging from the hold. By then, any pirate, no less foolish, would have guessed the identity of the approaching poet. He was singing the Nibelungenlied, about a noble warrior Siegfried, who fell at the hands of a wicked schemer, and who, until his death, had considered Hagen his dearest brother. Wasn't this a dirge tailor-made for them? The only difference was that the Siegfried in the song was truly dead, while the Siegfried outside the song had crawled back from the depths of hell, standing before Hagen once again after so many years. Crack, 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 crack. Leif's figure slowly rose from the hatch, marching in time, accompanied by horns, sword in hand, shield in hand. He held a headless corpse under his arm, and halfway through, he casually dropped the body at Bonnet's feet. Bonnet remained motionless. "You killed Julius," Leif didn't answer, but his mouth opened, still emitting a resounding hymn. Even mortally wounded, he still had the strength to strike back. The shield's jewels flew, the shield crumbling in his grasp. How much the distinguished guest longed for revenge. Hagen stumbled beneath his blows, a resounding echo echoing through the woods. If only, Leif interrupted his rhyme for the first time, raising his sword high, pointing it directly at Bonnet's face. If only he had a sword, Hagen would have been dead. If only he had a sword, Hagen would have been dead. If only I had a sword, my brother, you would have been dead. The trumpet blast stopped at that moment. At that moment, the trumpet stopped, the steps stopped, the singing stopped, even the panting and the gurgling of blood stopped. Everyone held their breath. Holding their breath held their souls, holding their hearts, holding their breath, holding time, endlessly, endlessly. The pirates almost suspected that they would die in the midst of holding their breath, until, swish. Bonnet slowly drew out Harold the Merciless's sword. He held the sword in his hand, took off the steel shield from his back, untied his belt, knelt on one knee, and slowly and methodically tied the shield strap around his arm. After doing all this, he stood up, straightened his back, and faced his brother. "I don't know why you are lamenting. The threats we felt have now dissipated, and no one dares to oppose us. I am so happy that your authority has fallen in my hands." "Don't brag," Leif retorted. "If I had known in advance that you had a despicable plan, I would have dealt with you long ago and would never have died. I am only sad for the legacy of the ruthless. After my death, he will be subject to many rumors, saying that he appeared in the world in a conspiracy and murder. I struggle to breathe, just because I feel sad for him. However, you can only have a dying struggle, but it cannot last, because the sword of death has pierced and cannot be saved. Even if you are proud and brave, you will not speak again." Bonnet swung the sword down with a swish. "Leif, you should not live." Leif's eyes widened. "But Tyr did not allow me to die before I washed away the filth of the blood ship. That is not Tyr's grace, my brother. You are just an unlucky guy, reincarnated unknowingly, and became Loki's replacement for punishment. Even if I were smeared with snake venom, I would drink it gladly. Even if I were bound by iron chains, I would be content. Bonnet, Loki's ugliness stems from the sins he instigated. His soul has fallen, just as you have debased the great Viking name." But Harold recognized me. Bonnet was furious. I held his sword and tightened my grip on his shield. "Unlike you, Sanctuary in the halls of Vanaheim, your name is forbidden even to the dusk." "I can renounce my name," Leif said coldly. "As long as I can wash the red ship with your blood, anything else is forgivable." The war horn suddenly sounded again, a sharp, hissing cry. Bonnet lowered his head amid the wailing cry. "I am tired, my brother. If you could die cleanly, I would pay tribute to your heroic spirit." "What a pity, you are unworthy of the reputation of a hero," he sighed. In the dark gun room, 4 red lights suddenly appeared. P.S. Viking hymn, spreading hands. The dialogue between Leif and Bonnet comes from the Viking epic poem Barenegen Song. The subsequent allusions are relatively concentrated. First, Loki instigated the dark god to murder the light god. leading to his imprisonment at the foot of the World Tree, where he suffered venom, chains, and ugliness. Second, during Ragnarok, Vanaheim did not participate in the war, hence the saying, "Twilight is not worthy of being written down." Under the protection of Vanaheim, that's it. Chapter 472 People favored by Tyr. I don't know the words to describe what I saw and heard that day. Good heavens, even though I'm used to facing pagan pirates, I already knew Drake was a unique group that truly believed in freedom. But 3 true Viking berserkers gathered on a tiny ship, the Alvet? If every logbook entry didn't include the year, month, and date at the beginning, I'd have thought I'd arrived at the height of Byzantium and witnessed the legendary, invincible Varangian Guard. The Battle of Bastere, a brutal continuation and conclusion of the Viking Islands naval battle, at that moment truly became a bloody stage for the Vikings. The gun bay was dark. Although it was still daylight, the sea was well lit, and the view was wide, but that had nothing to do with the gun bay. To create the perfect atmosphere for a street fight, the Alvet's gunners hide-sealed not only the hatches but also all the gun ports. Limited light seeped in through the slits of the gun port, blending with the dim yellow glow of the wind lanterns to create a peculiar visual effect of dusk or dawn, dim and hazy, not so much that it was invisible, but certainly not clear. In such darkness, 4 points of red light gleamed amidst the roar. Leif launched an attack. He strode towards Bonnet, shield raised high. The 3 steps between them vanished in a flash, his muscles bulging to the limit, and he swung his raised arm down heavily. Like thunder from the sky. Bonnet stretched his arm to meet it, and the steel shield and the steel sword met, making not a crisp sound but a boom. Boom. Bonnet was struck by the sword and sent flying, but his center of gravity remained motionless. As if on his own accord, he moved his entire body back half a meter, landed on the ground, and immediately lowered his shield, twisted his body, and swept out with a sword. The sword slashed down Leif's side. Leif dropped to a horse stance, raising his shield to meet the blow. Another dull thud echoed, and Leif's face flushed crimson, his feet rooted to the ground. He held the sword in a fierce manner, slowly raising his shield. Bonnet, you've abandoned the knight's teachings. Bonnet held down his sword, unleashing all his might. I only did what was best. Leif, the entire ship has abandoned you. Without the knight's protection, you're unfit to lead. That's no reason to desecrate a bloodship, Leif roared, raising his shield and sending Bonnet stumbling backward. If you deem me unfit to captain, you can dismiss me, exile me, betray me. But a Viking cannot desecrate the sacred bloodship. You've done what deserves death, and even death cannot wash away the shame. I've had enough of your foolishness. Bonnet's eyes grew redder, and he leaped to his feet, raising his shield and bringing it down with a fierce blow. Boom. Boom. You, the knight, you refuse to see the times. Times have changed. Times have changed. Boom. Boom. Bonnet struck again and again, the sharpened edge of his steel shield slicing into Leif's like an axe. Every step he took was met by Leif's retreat. Times have changed. You will only lead the Vikings to their death, to their demise. Put away your foolish faces and consider why I have the support of this entire ship, because you have all renounced honor. Leif retreated, and Bonnet's shield slashed through the air, causing him to lose his balance. He stumbled, and Leif caught him instantly. Leif raised his sword and stabbed Bonnet in the neck, forcing Bonnet to parry. Swish! Sparks streamed down like a cascade from the point where the 2 swords clashed. The narrow, heavy blade of the uncrowned king snapped, locking onto the merciless's blade. Leif stretched his legs and kicked Bonnet's shield, sending Bonnet flying. Boom! Each blow from the berserker had the force to split mountains. Leif's kick sent Bonnet flying backward, knocking aside 2 pirates who couldn't dodge, and crashing into the stairs behind him. Since you've renounced Viking glory, return the god's blessing. Return the favor Tyr has bestowed upon you. Leif leaped to his feet. The 3-meter-high cabin ceiling was no match for a powerful leap from a giant like them, but he leaped forward, his body bent like a bow, his arms stretched to the limit, and stabbed Bonnet like a cannonball. Bonnet didn't have time to stand. Sitting amidst a pile of broken wood, he struggled to his feet, half crushing his shield and deflecting Leif's sword. With all his strength gone, Bonnet sprang to his feet, sideways, and charged. The offense and defense reversed in an instant, Bonnet's powerful shoulder thrust sending Leif flying high into the air, crashing against the cabin's ceiling before slamming back to the ground. Leif's heart nearly stopped. His vision went dark, and when he regained his blood-red vision, the ruthless's blade was already slicing down on his head. Fortunately, the berserker had never known fear. Even with a blade at his fingertips, Leif could keep his eyes open and roll over. Bonnet's sword struck the deck, cracking, sinking, and shattering, like a direct artillery strike, shaking the entire gun bay to the ground. Tyr won't take away his favor from me. Standing beside the shattered hole he had created, Bonnet's voice was calm, without a trace of anger. He knows I'm right. For the future glory of the Vikings, he knows you and the knight are wrong. Standing by the riverbank of history, watching the ripples of water, those reinforcements that, by chance, arrive in the wrong place at the wrong time are often seen as evidence of a commander's incompetence. But does a commander really need to bear the responsibility for all the mistakes? Katarina crafted a beautiful boarding plan. To prevent Alvet from being unable to reunite with the Skuas and Puffins, she confined a powerful but small Leif squad to the lower hold, waiting for their opportunity. To ensure a sufficient number of prey, Duriki was displayed by the sailors and then returned to the lower hold in front of the pirates, luring the pirates' elite to descend and seize the prisoners. This wasn't the most promising aspect of the entire boarding plan. The shortest and most accessible route from the main deck to the lower holds was through the gun bay. So, despite the limited manpower on the main deck, Catalina painstakingly persuaded Captain Frayne to idle nearly half the ship's firepower, a total of 92 gun crews, in the gun bay. This idleness proved to be incredibly effective. At a range of over 20 meters, the line formations fired 1 round per minute, and the battle formations 6 rounds per minute. The gunners unleashed a suppressive barrage for 30 minutes, inflicting nearly 50 casualties on the elite pirates, led by Bonnet himself. This result far exceeded the combined casualties of the main deck defenses. The pirates' gruesome deaths on that lower staircase were clearly not due to the bravery of the sailors, but rather to strategic design. The maritime group's independently designed ship boasts many distinctive details, most of which focus on high speed and maneuverability, but also incorporate considerations for pirate-specific close quarters and boarding, such as the anti-gun shelling. While bombardment plating was not uncommon during this era, it was primarily adopted by warships and rarely seen on civilian merchant ships. This was because a ship's bombardment plating required 4 to 5 cargo holds for storage, which for a Tier 5 ship was equivalent to nearly half the ship's total storage space. A similar design applied to the hatches in the lower holds. Most armed merchant ships had 3 hatches on the main deck, 1 large and 2 small, corresponding to the foremast, midmast, and mizzenmast. The small hatches on the sides were primarily for pedestrians, while the large central hatch, perpendicular to another large hatch in the lower hold, was primarily used for loading and unloading cargo and mounted artillery. However, the maritime group, taking into account the needs of boarding warfare, made minor modifications to the large hatch below the mainmast. First, the lower large hatch was eliminated, and second, the upper large hatch was adjusted so that it could no longer be lifted and could only be opened with a crank built into the lower hold. These changes had a negative impact on merchants. The inability to directly access cargo through the lower hold significantly increased the workload of loading and unloading. The manual transmission used to support the hatch not only added weight but also increased the maintenance burden. Therefore, even the Drake Merchant Squadron's armed merchant ships, after careful consideration, still adopted traditional designs. Only the full-time warships of the direct fleet truly employed transmission hatches. It was this unique transmission hatch that gave rise to Catalina's current boarding defense tactics. With insufficient numbers on the main deck, the foredeck was abandoned, and the quarterdeck was defended. Invading pirates, if they didn't want to challenge the narrow and complex corridors of the forecastle, could only descend through the foremast hatch. They might retreat temporarily under the barrage of fire, but as long as they persisted in their plans to capture the prisoners, they would inevitably face the gunner's line, as Catalina's assigned task was to stand by until the intensity of the fire could no longer be maintained. The gun base performed their assigned task remarkably well, only attaching bayonets when their barrels overheated and retreating in an orderly manner to the main deck to support the battle. But who could have known that the Sturgren bloodline had awakened? In a divine irony, during the counterattack orchestrated by Katarina, the gunners, considered the main force of the counterattack, had deployed themselves in a dense boarding formation, only to be slaughtered by a berserker, rendered useless. Sturgren went on a killing spree. The newly minted berserker, his ferocious shackles in hand, charged headfirst into the gunner's ranks, his every move unleashing a torrent of blood. In a split second, he sent a dozen gunners flying, their bodies splattering in bizarre positions, colliding with their comrades, causing even more casualties. Katarina leaped from the mast, seizing the moment when Sturgren's strength had waned and new strength had yet to return, thrusting her sword forward. Suddenly, Sturgren extended a large hand. His free left hand extended, his large palm blocking Katarina's blade like a shield. The sword pierced his palm, blood gushing from the wound. Sturgren didn't even frown. He waited until the sword had completely pierced his hand, then he grabbed hold of Katarina's hand. Pain. Intense pain. Katarina felt her hand was being crushed. But before she could think of any solution, the world began to spin. Sturgren grabbed her and threw her to the ground, then picked her up with one hand and tossed her away like trash. Boom. Katarina slammed hard against the poop bulkhead, shattering the porthole and opening the hatch. She slid to the ground, as if dead, blood streaming from her forehead and face, but no visible injuries were visible. The nearby sailors watched in stunned silence, momentarily losing track of time. After an unknown amount of time, Katarina began to cough softly, which grew more and more violent, until she vomited a large mouthful of blood before regaining her breath. The gunnery officer hurried to help her. Let the sailors spread out. She leaned against the gunner for a moment, struggling to steady herself, and staggered to pick up the sword at her feet. Don't crowd together, provide support nearby. She took a deep breath, raised her hand, and wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth with the back of her hand, leaving a sloppy and ugly scour on her face. I'm not good at dealing with men, but I will hold that berserker off. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 473, One Person's Strength. Katarina is no weakling. She picked up a sword at age 4, ran away from home at 13, and enlisted in the army at 15, concealing her gender. Soon after, she became a bandit, ultimately becoming a candidate for Pirate King and, by chance, joining Lorraine's crew. She has practiced swordsmanship for over 20 years. 20 years of dedicated effort is enough to transform even a young person with limited talent into a skilled swordsman, and Katarina possesses not only that focus but also exceptional talent and a genuine knightly heritage. She is exceptional. Perhaps from a purely warrior perspective, she's still far inferior to freakish superheroes like Lorraine, Henna, Leif, and Wang Yi, but her combat skills are far more comprehensive than those of Pierce and Noah. As for the likes of Acheron, Bell, and Kran, even their all-out efforts wouldn't be enough to outperform them. Lorraine once quipped, Europe's foremost knightly tradition has reduced Katarina to a second-rate, top-tier warrior. This unintentional remark may be the world's most objective assessment of Katarina. And today, the foot-fighting knight stood before the awakened berserker. Blood trickled down her hair, soaking the collar and sleeves of her shirt with a sticky pad. The soaked fabric clung to her skin, rubbing gently with her movements, causing a stinging sensation. Katarina couldn't understand why blood stung. She had no visible wounds, but the skin where blood flowed, her head, back, arms, and hands, stung with an incessant pain. Could it be a curse like the Iron Maidens? Her mind drifted uncontrollably, searching for answers. The captain said that the gods of lesser families show special favoritism to their followers. Is it for after-sales service? Or is it for reputation? I really can't remember. Dizziness washed over her, and Katarina staggered, gripping her sword and struggling to steady herself. He's so rude about his own beliefs. Perhaps that's why the captain can't become a berserker. She raised her head slightly. Not far away, a large, blurry, humanoid figure appeared. The last of her thoughts told her that it was her opponent. Tisk, I hate fanatics. Katarina broke into a run, dragging her sword along, her body swaying like a drunk, each step unsteady, as if she might fall at any moment. Sturgren stared at her in confusion, his red eyes etched with bewilderment, leaving a trail of bloody footprints. Chivalric virtues first, Katarina shouted, swinging her sword. God is above, all life is below, all are equal, there is no distinction between high and low. Therefore, I am humble. The sword pierced the air and swung towards Sturgren's neck. Sturgren raised his shackles and easily blocked it, his distracted gaze suddenly fixed. Enemy, ouch! With a roar, he roughly pushed the sword away, clenched his pierced left hand into a fist, and swung it towards Katarina. Katarina ducked to avoid the blow, spun around to the other side, and before her right sword could follow, She raised the dagger in her left arm and stabbed Stedrin in the kidney. The second chivalric virtue. Live with honor, die with honor. Fear not a strong foe, gain renown through battle. Thus is my honor. The dagger thrust itself straight at Stedrin's waist. Stedrin howled, twisting his body and delivering a whip kick as he did so. Katerina thrust with all her might, leaving no room for maneuver. She could only watch helplessly as her opponent dodged. The serrated blade tore through her opponent's clothing, slashing through his skin, leaving long streams of blood. Bang! Before she could despair, as Katerina stabbed Stedrin's whip kick struck her shoulder, sending her flying, spitting blood, 4 or 5 meters away. Protect the Admiral, Captain Freen cried in terror from atop the poop deck, his musketeers at his side quickly opening fire at Stedrin. Stedrin leaped toward the ensuing battle between sailors and pirates, dodging the lead bullets and casually picking up a hapless pirate about to finish him off. The scene was beyond everyone's expectations. The sailor, having narrowly escaped death, watched in amazement as his opponent, screaming, was lifted up by his own captain. Without even a word of help, he was flung toward the musketeers. Bang! Having missed his target, Stedrin tilted his head and looked at the sailor on the ground. The sailor hurriedly picked up his lance and stabbed, his bayonet piercing Stedrin's leg. Stedrin then grabbed his head, lifted it, and gently squeezed it. Crack! Pink liquid gushed from the sailor's orifices. He could no longer struggle. His dangling arms and legs became Stedrin's shield, blocking an entire volley of lead bullets with his body. Ouch! A second human javelin blasted towards the poop, shattering the railing and striking a musketeer with pinpoint accuracy. The musketeers and the long-dead sailors rolled into a pile, his chest sunken, and he rolled only twice before he was completely silent. This was the first casualty of the musketeers since the start of the war. It was not caused by shooting or hand-to-hand combat, but by this completely irrational, soul-shattering brutal shock. The musketeers were terrified. And Stedrin seemed to find it very interesting. The attack that threatened him stopped, his opponents were so scared that they could not move, and there were many lively javelins around him. He flew to the next target. But his feet had just left the ground when a heart-wrenching cry came from behind him. The third virtue of chivalry. Protect the weak, help the helpless, sacrifice yourself for justice, and treat death as home. Therefore I am. Sacrifice, puff. A sharp sword chased him from behind, piercing his lower back and abdomen. Stedrin was forced to stop, watching the blood drip from the sword's tip. He spun abruptly, not caring if the movement would only widen the wound, and simply raised the yoke and swung it at Katerina. Katerina was powerless to dodge. The chase had drained her of all her strength. She could no longer see, and in the darkness, only the sound of the wind approaching. She had to block it. If she couldn't, she would die. She gathered all her strength into her left arm, raising it with all her might. The broad guard of the knight's dagger, like an armed shield, met the incoming yoke, colliding mid-stride. Unparalleled force, transmitted through the collision of yoke and shield, ripped through Katerina, and the pain washed over her like a tsunami. The longsword slipped from her hand, and Katerina lost her grip. She was flung back by the berserker for the third time, careening straight through the dining room's hatch, striking a wounded soldier lying at the table. He then flew high, shattering a rum barrel in the corner with a bang. The sweet, fishy liquor flowed down her cheeks and into her mouth. Katerina's lips trembled as she murmured, "Wine, so sweet." Boom. Stedrin took a step toward Katerina, and the entire ship felt the vibrations from the deck. He took a second step. Boom. A third. Boom. He lifted his foot. Boom. This time the vibration seemed to come a little earlier. The panicked sailors noticed, the terrified pirates noticed, the dying Katerina noticed, and even Stedrin, in his frenzy, who should have been oblivious to anything but life and death, noticed. He stood there, legs raised high, thinking. Boom. 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 The vibrations of the ship's hull grew more frequent, their source becoming increasingly clear. Captain Frey noticed an unusual warping of the deck near the mizzenmast. The previously closed aft hatch seemed to bulge, and the batten board seemed to be cracking faintly. A sudden thought struck him, a possibility he could never accept. Human power, the power of one man. Boom. The batten boards exploded from within, and a burly figure was thrown backward amidst the shattering debris, crashing into the poop bulkhead with a resounding thud. Furthermore, the gunpowder barrels in the hold seemed to shatter, sending a thick cloud of black dust rising into the sky like a volcanic eruption. Amidst this cloud, another burly figure stepped onto the deck. "Bonnet! Stand up," the figure screamed amidst the smoke and dust. "Having lost your plot, are you so inconsolable?" The figure wedged in the bulkhead trembled, yanked itself free with a click, and landed lightly on the ground. "But it seems you're more seriously injured, Leif. Perhaps one more blow and you'll stop howling, then stab me." The first figure slapped his chest, crouched down, raised his sword and the remaining half of his shield. "I'll chop off your head." "You can't chop it off," the second figure roared and charged, sweeping out in a whirlwind. Chapter 474 Human Comedy. Enemy ships approaching on the port side. Saturation warning. Distance 200, 270, whirlpool escape and lair closing in succession, romanticism intercepting right ahead. Evade, overwhelmed. Aboard the Valkyrie, Lorraine was feeling incredibly frustrated, as evidenced by the markings covering his writing pad. What was Lorraine's style? Although a rare top-ranked graduate in the Naval Academy's history, and despite achieving a record of unwavering victory in map-based exercises during his time there, Lorraine never considered himself the preeminent naval commander of his time. His style relied heavily on inspiration, preferring to fill strategic and tactical gaps with capricious, unplanned impulses. To put it bluntly, he was a gambler, with both high and low limits. Writing and calculation were certainly essential to his tactical system. After all, true gamblers are thoroughly rational strategists before placing their bets, and Lorraine was no exception. But this was wartime. As a fundamental part of gambling, Lorraine should have consciously placed his bet the moment the dealer dealt the cards. The subsequent battle depended on card skills, acting skills, inspiration, and the favor of fate, but not on probability. Lorraine should have understood this best. But he still picked up the clipboard, practically declaring his mind completely lost. Lorraine flipped open a new sheet of paper and scribbled down the currents and wind direction, then drew the Valkyrie's position, the positions of the Romance, the Rescuer, and the Tempest, as well as the approaching Queen Anne's Revenge, the Whirlpool Escape, and the Rice. The scene suddenly tilted to one side, with all the enemies either directly ahead or to the port side. Even someone with no knowledge of nautical charts could easily see that the Valkyrie's position had been thoroughly explored. It was a terrible feeling. Lorraine puffed out his cheeks and drew a twisting, diagonal line on the paper. Ride 5 degrees to starboard, raise the broadside slightly, deckhands check the condition of the gun shields, clear all unnecessary personnel immediately. His orders were quickly carried out, the crew busying themselves almost numbly. The Queen Anne's Revenge finally approached. Blackbeard's own daughter, with a reckless pace, approached until she was 50 meters from the Valkyrie before the saturation bombardment finally arrived. Boom. Boom boom boom, bomb impact. A barrage of shells flew in from extremely close range, pelting the Valkyrie's hull. One high-flying missile struck the gun shield, snapping its support. The 2-meter-high ironclad plank spun from side to side and crashed into the sea. Lorraine's view widened. Through the gap, he saw a twisted plate of armor detached from the bombardment and falling into the sea. He sighed. "Edley, which piece is this? If there's only one this time, it's the 13th. Edley also held a writing board, on which was a count pattern of 4 solids and 1 horizontal bar. 2 of them were full, and the last had only 2 solids. A few lines were left blank, and there was an incomplete pattern of 3 solids. Edley felt the vibrations of the hull and picked up the carbon rod, filling it up immediately. "And the hull has been hit 5 times, President." Lorraine bit his writing board and mumbled, "I know, playing with sandbags is fun." Lorraine always knew that being upset wouldn't solve anything. So he quickly adjusted himself and tucked the writing board under his arm. "Lower another catching sail to improve stability. Tell the lookout to continue to be alert to Blackbeard's intention to board. As long as he doesn't board, the destroyer can't hurt Valkyrie. Also, keep sending people to urge Kren. I remember that I asked for 30 minutes of emergency repair time, and now it's more than 40 minutes. How long is he going to delay?" Edley opened his mouth and carefully defended Kren. "President, there's nothing the first mate can do. The armor plates are falling off too fast, and the counterweights on both sides are constantly changing. This is his problem, not mine." Lorraine pouted and twisted his neck. "Valkyrie didn't come to this world to be someone else's target ship. Tell him that I formally cancel the previous order. Let him decide how long it will take to complete the center of gravity adjustment. Recheck the knot, check carefully. Remember that our temporary counterweight is a round gun barrel, not a bag of sand and gravel, nor the gold and volcanic rock pressed in the bottom cabin. The price of a failed fix is life. like a sudden stroke. Even God won't take a gunner crushed to heaven by a gun, so, be careful. Yatrin's voice echoed through the gun bay, moving from front to back, then left to right. Yatrin wanted a more solemn lecture, but the problem was that, in order to regain his balance as quickly as possible, the gun bay deck was now piled high with gun barrels removed from the gun carriages. They were fixed in rows on pillars, some leaning slightly to the left, others far to the right, crowding the aisle and unevenly arranged. He could only hop along the edge of the gun row, feeling like a wild monkey performing a dance for pleasure in the rainforest. Yatrin hated himself for becoming a wild monkey incapable of pleasure, and even more so for the disorder in his gun bay, which had become the chaotic mess it was now. After all, if there's another evasive mishap, there really won't be anywhere to hide. He kicked the tightly strapped gun barrel at his foot, his eyes sweeping across the cabin with a hatred of someone who'd murdered his father and taken his wife. The culprit, Kren, was at the stern, with a tripod in front of him, and 2 tripods to either side. He knelt on one knee, his eyes level with the trig, reading the scales one by one as the ship swayed. There were 2 other groups like him on board, one for the fore, middle, and aft masts, each with a recorder, a liaison officer, and a central liaison officer. The combined data would be compared with his own and then returned to him. Yatrin had once asked Kren if the data from these tests was truly reliable, but Kren remained silent for a long time, saying, "We don't have any more reliable means." The answer was clear enough. Kren had done his best, but even if the temporary adjustments were fully implemented, the Valkyrie would never return to its pre-accident state. Perhaps, pessimistically, what they were doing was meaningless. A familiar roar, accompanied by a tremor, reached his body. Yatrin, holding onto the bulkhead, stood on the ammunition crate stacked aft, listening silently. Whoosh! Starboard! Whoosh, whoosh! Port! He shrugged and crawled to Kren's side. "I'm having a misconception, big idiot." Kren stared intently at the stabilizer. "What misconception?" "It feels like the captain has given up on treatment." "Oh, give up on what?" "Give up, abandon treatment. I heard that from Daniel. I heard the captain never let Daniel treat him, and he refused to drink expensive alchemical potions. So Daniel coined the term, or maybe he coined it himself." Kren blinked his eyes. "You mean, the captain is sick?" The atmosphere in the cabin suddenly became intense. Nearly 200 pairs of eyes stared at Yatrin, their gossip blazing in the air, as if a chain reaction explosion were imminent. Yatrin cleared his throat with a smug look on his face. No, I mean the captain seems to have given up on evasion." Tisboos erupted, and stiff necks tucked into piles. No one wanted to bother with this jerk anymore, just eating and drinking. Only Kren was honest. "It's not seems, the evasion stopped a long time ago," he explained to Yatrin while comparing the data. "Probably from the moment we told the captain we would use the gun barrels to adjust the ship's center of gravity, the ship's roll and sway have been kept to a minimum. The captain is relying entirely on the Valkyrie's high side and protective power to hold on. In fact, if Blackbeard had a gunner as good as you on his ship, we would have sunk long ago." Yatrin froze in place, his mouth open, unable to utter a single word for a long time. Karen didn't expect Yatrin to be so sentimental, and whispered to comfort him, "Yaza, we have to believe in the captain's ability to control this situation. He must have taken into account the generally poor quality of pirate gunners. What you should do now is not to be moved, but to me. An excellent gunner, huh? Do you really admire me so much and think I'm the best gunner in the world?" Yatrin's face flushed with shame, and his eyes sparkled. "Silly guy, well, although I know that my charm is not limited to ladies, I'm really not good at dealing with the passionate emotions of the same sex. If it's your sister." Before he finished speaking, he suddenly realized that Karen's face looked a little bad. "Oh, by the way, what did you say I should do now?" "Get out." Karen lowered his head with a trembling voice. "Get out before I shove the barrel of the gun into your asshole." Chapter 475 Self-Deception. Charge, boom boom boom. The Valkyrie slowly cut out from the Romantica's bow at a very close range, like a hapless pirate on their first voyage, lost in a panic and walking into a trap. A similar scene had already occurred 4 times today. Aside from the first time, when Lorraine's trick succeeded, the Romantica remained poised and waited for the next 3 times, offering the Valkyrie's slow movement the warmest welcome with its rare stillness. Lorraine truly knew his own suffering. Without the protection of his artillery or the added speed, he avoided even sharp turns whenever possible. In these conditions, he could only treat the pirate ship as a headland, artificially creating obstacles in the vast expanse of the ocean. In other words, he endured a round of beatings in exchange for a moment of peace. Judging from the previous two experiences, these periods of peace typically lasted about 5 minutes, while the Queen Anne's Revenge, the slowest ship to reload, only took 4 minutes. This meant that Blackbeard, despite possessing complete control, had opted for a relatively relaxed and organized group-based approach. His conservatism was so extreme that Lorraine couldn't tell whether the Valkyrie's opening performance had left such a deep impression on him that he hesitated, or whether he had assumed victory was certain and was already considering managing the cost of victory. However, regardless of whether Blackbeard was being self-deprecating or arrogant, at least until the Valkyrie showed signs of defeat, Lorraine didn't need to worry too much about being forced to board. This was the biggest and most fundamental benefit. There was still plenty of time, and the Valkyrie didn't have much to prepare in its current state. After a moment's deliberation, Lorraine decided to personally inspect the repairs to the gun bay. There were 4 ways to access the gun bay. First, the forecastle and stern decks were arranged independently of the main deck, leaving only a hatch on the lowest level to access the lower hold. Through these 2 doors, sailors could enter the lower hold, and then ascend through the lower hold passageway to the gun bay. A second, manually operated loading and unloading hatch forward of the mainmast connected the enclosed upper deck, the gun bay, the cargo hold, and directly to the lower hold. The mechanism for opening it was also in the lower hold. A third, a hatch directly in front of the steering wheel, between the enclosed upper deck and the mizzenmast, was the only open-air access to the gun bay. While convenient for entry and exit, it was difficult for Lorraine to get from the foredeck to the aft. The fourth hatch, located inside the foremast, was hidden not far from the enclosed upper deck entrance door. It was not only convenient but also conveniently located near Lorraine's current position. Lorraine naturally chose the closest option. Entering through the hatch, he saw that the mess on the upper deck had been tidied up. The original 24-pounder had vanished, leaving only the empty, stowed gun carriage and a few spots of dried blood on the ground. Stepping on the bloodstains, he descended to the gun bay and saw over 30 gun barrels of varying lengths, tied to the ground with ropes like panpipes. The staggered, uneven arrangement created a strangely beautiful effect. Kren was arranging his work in the aft section, farthest from Lorraine. Seeing Lorraine descend, he hurried over with Atron. "Captain. I was just about to come find you." Lorraine's eyes lit up. "Have you adjusted it?" "An unreliable, temporary measure," Kren said regretfully. "But we don't have the ability to restore the upper and lower bays to their original state right now. For now, this is the only effective measure we have. Think positively." Lorraine patted Kren's arm soothingly. "At least, if we had always fought against the regular navy, we might never have discovered this hidden danger. Your comfort only makes me feel worse." The gun bay conditions were dire. Despite his best efforts, Kren could only barely maintain enough space for the limited number of guns. Only 3 guns remained operational on the port side, and 5 on the starboard side. All the 24-pound ballast on the enclosed deck had been used as counterweight, leaving not a single gun untouched. To complicate matters further, this was only the space for the guns. Firing them required ammunition and gunpowder. Carrying them in groups from the corners was impractical, and hauling them in advance, which would occupy the loading and unloading chambers, was also impractical. Crone planned to have Atron allocate a few empty boxes to pre-pack the ammunition and temporarily place them on the gun barrels as needed. Atron was reluctant, but aside from securing the boxes with ropes, he couldn't offer a more practical solution. Lorraine could only continue to play the role of comforter. He explained that from a safety perspective, reducing the number of shots fired and improving accuracy would effectively reduce the risk of accidents. Therefore, Atron only needed to fire 1 round per ship, and the battle could be ended within 5 rounds. Yatron wondered if he was hallucinating. "Captain, what did you just say?" 1 shot per ship, 5 shots to sink all enemy ships, including the Queen Anne's Revenge." Lorraine looked away guiltily. "No problem, aren't you Yatron who never misses a shot? This is a big problem." "Ah." "Kren." Yatron's voice was loud, and Lorraine's voice was even louder than his. "So my Valkyrie has regained its combat capability, right? About 90% wave resistance, 70% balance, and 80% speed." Kren flipped through the budget data. "Now all that's left is to verify its effectiveness. The Valkyrie needs to increase its speed to 8 knots, then quickly reduce it to 3 knots, and make a turn of no more than 10 degrees. As long as the hull can be stabilized, we can operate normally before these counterweights fall apart. Lorraine narrowed his eyes. If we're verifying, wouldn't it be better to add artillery fire? Add artillery fire? Kren and Yatrin looked at each other. Are you planning to? For the first time, the Valkyrie stopped moving. She rested on the sea, her sails furled, leaving only the bowsprit and a half-stretched sternsail, and she clumsily began to turn in place. Even in pristine condition, such maneuvers were not the Valkyrie's forte. Her length-to-width ratio was too great, and her slender hull was far less stable than the current mainstream ships. Blackbeard held up his telescope, silent. A moment later, Semris and Zheng Anyue arrived together. Blackbeard lowered the telescope. Semris, what do you think Zhi is going to do? A last-ditch effort, Semris sneered. His tortoise shell is very hard, not even the Queen Anne's 32-pounder can penetrate it. But a shell is a shell, his claws are injured, and no matter how hard the shell is, it can't keep him safe for life, so he should have escaped. Why did he turn around, and turn around on the spot? Because he can't escape, Semris answered confidently. In the previous half hour, Zhi's flagship only fired 6 shots in total, 5 on the starboard side, 1 on the bow, and no shots on the port and stern. Zhi doesn't like to use the stern gun, because he is an offensive fighter, and his ships are rarely chased. But the port side is the focus of our attack. There is only one reason for not firing a shot, and that is that the port side is paralyzed. I have another data here. In the previous half hour, Valkyrie was hit 28 times, with an average speed of 4 knots, 5 large turns of more than 10 degrees, and 0 full rudder turns. It can be seen that the scope of Zhi's paralysis is far more than just the port side. There should be a big problem with the stability of the hull, which has caused problems with artillery fire, steering, and acceleration. He can't escape. Not only can he not escape, he can't even do basic evasion. He can only drift on the sea, waiting for us to weaken him shell by shell until he is penetrated and sunk, so he has to save himself. Semris drew a circle in the air. Today's wind direction is southerly. Turning around can better cut into the tailwind and try to increase his speed when breaking out. If my estimate is correct, the increase is about 2 to 3 knots, which means that Zhi's ironclad ship is likely to reach a speed of 7 knots, barely the same speed as ours. But is it possible for him to complete a turn in a combat state? It's difficult. The distance required for a small arc turn is too long. It is almost certain that our intention will be interrupted. In order to make his dream come true, Zhi can only choose to take a risk and turn around on the spot. Semris used 3 affirmative sentences in a row, and then laughed out loud. Captain, Bakey is completely lost. This foolish action is even more ridiculous than fooling ourselves. As long as we block his escape route, we can easily end this war and become the one and only heroes of the pirate world. Captain, we are sure to win. Blackbeard could sense Semris's pride and joy amidst the exhilarating shouts and suppressed excitement. After all, he was the first to discover Valkyrie's abnormality, and Lorraine's desperate situation was largely due to his brain power. But Blackbeard still had a strange feeling in his heart, a feeling that something was wrong, but he couldn't express it accurately. He turned his head towards Zheng Anyue. The short shadow warrior stood on tiptoe, holding onto the railing, his brow furrowed. Captain, I can't refute what Semris says. His judgments have always been spot on. It's his ingenuity that has enabled us to turn defeat into victory and gain a complete advantage, but we're facing the white banner, that Lorraine Drake. I just think it's best if the Queen Anne's revenge doesn't get too close to the Valkyrie during the block. Lorraine Drake has never been truly panicked. Even at San Carlos, we didn't get the upper hand from him. Give yourself some wiggle room. What if everything so far was a deliberate trap? At least we still have options and won't be completely defeated, Captain. That's my only suggestion. With that, Zheng Anyue fell silent. As the two people Blackbeard relied on most for his strategy, he and Semris had already fully expressed their opinions. Despite their diametrically opposed positions, there was no point in arguing further. Blackbeard would make his own judgment. Every member of the pirate group knew their king was a dictator. Blackbeard raised his telescope again and watched the Valkyrie's awkward turn in the distance, watching silently without saying a word. After waiting until the turn was complete and the square sails were hoisted, he finally gave the order. Each ship implements a double-teaming tactic. After bombarding the Valkyrie, for subboarding, Semris, you will take care of the formation. Remember to place the Queen Anne's Revenge on the outer line on the port side. Yes. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.